On this occasion we start again with a manhwa entitled Returning to the Past with the Power of the King. The story begins at a place with a tense atmosphere, with a place filled with dozens of stone pillars and dozens of faces of living creatures that have been carved into a mountain there. There is one. A man who was struggling desperately to fight a wild monster that wanted to eat him. In order to survive, the man stabbed his dagger right into his insides, the monster's mouth, so that the monster immediately died with its mouth open without having time to bite the man with its sharp teeth. Look at his teeth, which was so sharp it made the man tremble in fear when his teeth hit the man's hand. Suddenly he immediately removed his hand from the monster's mouth. He looked so tired and afraid after defeating a monster that wanted to eat him. However, he felt happy. Finally he could use his strength to defeat monster. At the same time someone was calling him. It turned out he was being called by someone who was fighting against a group of monsters who had big size, and they seemed to have defeated some monsters there, but all the man defeated were small weak monsters. Then someone there asked, "What is the man doing? If the man is a porter, then do his job and collect all the drops. Doesn't he see the pile of monster corpses that are there in front of him, and did he think they were paying someone like him just to play around?" Hearing their scolding, he suddenly apologized. After scolding the man, they went back to fighting the monster while expressing their annoyance with porter, who said they were useless. Hearing that, he was silent for a moment without saying his annoyance towards them. Those who called themselves useless porters said that the world had suddenly changed, which ABIs is another dimension where monsters that only exist in fantasy stories really exist in their world. After the discovery of ABIs, people rise with a power capable of conquering monsters, and exploring is over. Therefore, the standard for judging someone is no longer based on personality or effort, but by their level of awakening. If they have a ranking, it's guaranteed to be very good, but it's a shame not for that guy. He's just a carrier and an unawakened person, never even opening his status windows at the age of 35. As long as he is not awakened, he will never be able to living life. What they felt apart from just being a carrier of goods. When he had finished collecting all the drops, he was also surprised when he would called everyone there. It turned out that everyone there was already in a collapsed condition, with a body covered in wounds and red liquid flowing to the ground, which they had all died without leaving a single person apart from the man. Seeing everyone in that condition, he wondered, were they dead? But suddenly he was shocked by the appearance of a strong entity that had a body size larger than the other monsters. The monster said that the man, the only person remaining, and this creature is a monster called Asmodeus, a monster entity that has a triple S rank. Seeing the appearance of the monster, suddenly he screamed as if he was scared, so he took out his weapon, but what? Was able to move some of his hands. At that moment he screamed as loud as possible, holding back the pain in the part of his hand that had been severed while trying to get away from the monster. He, not knowing what kind of monster had killed everyone there and made his hand cut off without even touching him. Without him realizing, the monster gave an small attack on the man's head until he couldn't do anything. This small attack was able to cause a fairly fatal wound on his forehead, until emitting red fluid on his head while crying, lamenting that his life would soon be killed. He wondered if this was how he would do it. Died at the last moment. He remembered that his parents had died in an accident and that he was always bullied when he was in high school. He also always been around all his life because he was not an awakener, but now that his life was about to end, he felt annoyed with himself, who was a trash loser, and his life is just an ordinary person without awakening. Suddenly, without him realizing it, his current condition means that a condition for his resurrection has been fulfilled. Then another entity suddenly appears above him along with a golden ladder that right in front of him. Seeing that, he also had time to wonder about what creature had appeared in front of him. A creature that had a body like a human, had long hair, but his whole body was covered by light. The man turned back with feeling shocked and also surprised about what had happened, even though he was about to die. But when he looked back, he saw his own body being guarded by someone who, lying on the ground right in front of Asmodeus. He also felt strange. Why did Asmodeus previously want to Killing him suddenly stopped right in front of him, as if time there suddenly stopped when he still didn't understand the situation there. The entity laughed while asking why. The man instead focused on creatures like Asmodeus, who suddenly stopped feeling towards him now. While smiling, the entity said, "Who knows, someone might want to call him king, but don't think about that." Then the entity sat down in his chair. He said that from now on he would give authority to the man. He had time. Don't understand what is called a king and what authority means. What is an entity? Knew what he was thinking. He was surprised when the entity said that his suspicions were not good, to which he only admired the determination and will of that man, so he decided to come before the man to choose him directly, but it's better not to think that a miracle like this will happen again. Hearing those words, he suddenly tried to ask what was meant by choosing him and what actually happened. While taking out a light in his hand, he told the man to waiting until the time comes. There will come a day where the man will understand everything, along with the appearance of an unknown creature right above them. The entity uttered goodbye by calling the man his key. Then the creature above them, named Kim Tae-hyun. After that incident, Kim Tae-hyun suddenly seemed to see a small light in the darkness. He also heard harsh words telling him to. He immediately woke up slowly and opened his eyes and saw someone laughing while lifting him up his hand, and suddenly a hard slap was thrown by the person, hitting him right in the face. His eyes, as if the slap had awakened him completely. It turned out that the people who had slapped him were the 3 bullies who always beat him when he was in high school. Kim Tae-hyun didn't understand why the bullies at his school could be there, even though he had just been on the floor. In the midst of the slaps that kept flying to his cheek, he realized something about the authority he got from the entity claiming to be king. Suddenly he saw the Windows status, which showed his name and age even there. It also says his rank is rank F with predation skills. After seeing his age, 19 years old, he realized that he had returned to 16 years ago when he was still in high school not long ago. After realizing that, Tae-hyun suddenly laughed out loud as if he felt very happy. When the bullies were getting annoyed because he suddenly laughed like crazy, when the bullies were about to beat him up, a fist suddenly shot towards his face. The man, and suddenly a hard punch was delivered by Tae-hyun right into the man's face, until the red liquid came out of his mouth and the man even fell to the ground. Then past his 2 colleagues, which immediately shocked them. Besides that, Kim Tae-hyun seemed so happy that he shed tears because he is now an Aukan, not a carrier like in his previous life. After realizing everything, he immediately wiped away the tears that were wet, some of them his face. At the same time, his 2 friends who had also experienced awakening tried to attack him with their respective abilities. According to them, Kim Tae-hyun was nothing to them, but Kim Tae-hyun was able to avoid the man's attack so easily. Then Tae-hyun threw a strong punch at the man's chin until the man was blown away. Continued by giving a kick to one of his friends who tried to attack him with ice abilities. For 35 years, Kim Tae-hyun lived as a person who did not experience awakening with the fundamentals until he learned all the information about ABIs and monsters. He also memorized most of the skills, and even he also learned all the fighting skills individually, so he will never lose if he only fights thugs who don't know anything like them, because all of that is the most basic thing. So until they fell unconscious without being able to land a single blow on Kim Tae-hyun, even though he fought them without using his skills. But even though he already had all those experiences from his previous life, he had to retrain physically with his body. Now, at the same time, he was surprised when he saw one of his friends still able to get up after receiving the first blow. The man did not expect if Tae-hyun turns out to have risen, but for him Kim Tae-hyun is just an insect. Then he uses his ability to finish off Kim Tae-hyun, an ability who can increase body strength by coating his body with stones. Without waiting long, the man immediately threw a punch that had been coated by a rock. Quickly, Tae-hyun immediately avoided the blow. He also avoided a blow that was aimed right at his face, but Tae-hyun was shocked when he saw the man was preparing to land an attack from above, and the attack hit so hard that it caused the floor there to crumble, creating a siege. Thick smoke. Luckily, the powerful attack didn't hit Tae-hyun, and Tae-hyun also didn't seem to be there, so Tae-hyun used the smoke to land his blow. from behind the man without being noticed, but the man was able to recognize Kim Taehyun's sudden attack, so he tried to throw a hard punch, but Kim Taehyun was able to dodge it and landed a strong punch on his face. But after landing the punch, Taehyun was shocked when he saw splashes of blood flying in front of his eyes. It turned out to be Taehyun's punch started to hurt his hand due to the hardness of the man's face. Taehyun felt he only hurt his hand when he hit the man. At the same time, a punch flew at him and he, preparing to block it, suddenly a powerful blow from a fist covered in stone hit Kim Taehyun heavily, and he couldn't withstand the strong blow until he was knocked down and hit the floor so hard that he couldn't get up again because received quite serious injuries after withstanding that strong blow. Seeing Taehyun's condition, the man suddenly laughed happily while saying that you should know your limits before being arrogant. He also asked whether Taehyun was aware what was the difference in strength. If it was like this, what would he do? Would the judge Taehyun will constantly try to escape or maybe struggle to survive with his very low awakening skills? But Taehyun won't answer all the questions. That man, he knew that everyone who had experienced awakening gained a skill and also a rank starting from F rank, which was almost the same as humans. Normal to the range that can be called a monster, which is physical ability, and skills that have awakened can increase drastically, but what he got was a skill that he had never even heard of before. Besides that, his ranking was also at the bottom of the ranking. He also realized he would never be able to win against that man who was someone who was already at the top, but for some reason this time Taehyun felt he wouldn't lose to him. Unexpectedly, he got up using the skills of the last ranked skills. At first, suddenly Kim Taehyun's entire body was enveloped by an overwhelming aura. Strong and slowly the red aura formed a monster head. It suddenly made the man shocked, even scared him. He didn't believe that Kim Taehyun, who they had been bullying all this time, was now had awakened. While seeing an aura on Taehyun's body, he wondered if this was it, a power that he felt a force moving according to his will. Then he opened his eyes, which had now changed when the man said that he didn't know what had happened. Then the man tried to attack Taehyun using the full strength he believed in. His current strength, he can kill Kim Taehyun, but such a strong attack can be blocked. With that, Taehyun's skills seemed to want to eat the man. The man was suddenly shocked when he saw that his attack could be blocked easily with just his hands without the man. You know, Taehyun's skill covers his body. Slowly the stone covers the man's hand started to come off one by one from his hands, as if Taehyun's strength was trying to remove him. At the same time, Taehyun's strength suddenly increased, as if he was slowly catching up and receiving the man's power. Suddenly he screamed as loud as possible, as if he felt pain, and it was true that the power of Taehyun's skill could devour and took all the man's strength, to the point of causing the man pain. When all his strength was about to be devoured, while the other students were busy with their own activities, there was no who knew that there was a spark of power from the roof of the school, even to the point that the spark of power turned into a powerful explosion of power. But they, still unaware of that, after a few moments the burst of power that enveloped them had completely disappeared, leaving only a mist of smoke, as well as the man's power had been completely devoured by Taehyun's strength, to the point that the man fell unconscious right in front of him. Besides that, Taehyun was also very tired after defeating the bully until the sweat was dripping from his face, but it was a good start for him because he managed to use the predation skill as a result of having preyed on his opponent. Taehyun is now rank E. Not only that, he has also gained a new skill called Stun Skin, which skill he got after devouring the power of the man before. And now Taehyun moved to the school clinic, where the teacher there was silent when he saw something. It turned out that the teacher saw Kim Taehyun bringing the 3 bullies there with. The condition of their clothes was shabby, and the condition of 3 people who had fainted, but what was worse was that Kim Taehyun still had time to greet the teacher there. While taking them inside, they received a fairly fatal wound. This immediately made the teacher there so shocked that he screamed when he saw the condition of all of them after their fight was over. Kim Taehyun moved the bullies, including Yukso, to the school clinic room for treatment, and the power of the nurse teacher there could heal his wounds, but of course he had to lie to the teacher about everything that happened, which in the end he succeeded in lying to the teacher by saying that they had fallen down the stairs. And now that his wound had completely healed, he immediately went home. For him it was a good thing because he experienced his awakening and succeeded in avenging his revenge on the bullies, including Yuxo, but the problem is that he still doesn't know for sure about the predation skills he has obtained. His rank is almost no changed. Even after training, in his entire life he never thought he could reach a different strength than the teacher there. After one fight, even though he was only F rank, his strength was able to exceed C rank, and he can even steal the skills of opponents he defeats. He also doesn't know why the entity who claims to be king gives him such power, and why he made him experience regression. Since then, in his mind he had many questions about it. What should he do now, which is to find out about his predation skills? While thinking about that, he had now arrived in front of his house, saw his house. Now he felt like it had been quite a while since he last came home, which was after the second. His parents died. Now he lives with his uncle and also with his cousin. He opened the door of his house. He knew that his uncle would come home late, so he decided to find out about his skills right after he went inside. Suddenly he stopped when he saw something in the house where he saw 3 people he didn't recognize and 1 person he knew collecting some money on the floor, and the person who was picking up the money was the son of his uncle, Jaeyoung, and his cousin. He didn't realize what Jaeyoung was doing. Taehyun asked why Jaeyoung didn't go to school shortly after, saying that Taehyun was surprised when he saw something in front of him, where he saw some money, which was scattered on the floor, and that's when Taehyun felt so annoyed with Jaeyoung's behavior. Taehyun remembered that even before he regressed, Jaeyoung always played with a group of delinquents, to the point of taking money from his house and always making a fuss. Taehyun didn't expect that something that would come next would be today. At the same time, Jaeyoung was seen whispering something to his friend, in which Jaeyoung told his friend that Taehyun was his cousin who had not yet experienced awakening. After hearing that Taehyun was just ordinary people, the man started to act arrogantly. He told Taehyun not to interfere if he didn't want to get beat up, let them do the work and take everything they need, said the man while touching Taehyun's head as if he was treating him as loser. Meanwhile, Taehyun just stared at the man without saying anything. However, Taehyun didn't feel afraid of the man's behavior. He actually smiled. According to him, didn't understand what Taehyun was saying. He was also shocked when he saw a punch flying towards his face, because he was so shocked that it made the man fall to the ground. The floor when Taehyun's punch flew towards him, even though the punch didn't hit him but him felt pain because his body hit the floor until he spit water out of his mouth. This suddenly made his friend very surprised when he saw that the man had been knocked down by Taehyun. Besides that, Taehyun intended to try his skills on the man, to the point that it made the man break out in cold sweat. Seeing what Taehyun was going to do, even he immediately panicked when he saw Kim Taehyun's palm flying towards his face. Amidst the panic of the man and his 3 friends, Taehyun tried to use predation skills on the man. That man, he also felt happy when he used his predation skill to devour his opponent's power, but he was suddenly shocked when the system stated that his predation skill was not working. Can be activated for now, while the man was just silent while wearing an annoyed face, as if he had been played by Kim Taehyun. On the other hand, he was still wondering why the skill, his predation, couldn't be used. It made him think about what had happened to his skills, but as he was thinking about that, he suddenly kicked was flying right towards his face. He was so focused on thinking about his skills that he didn't have time to dodge the kick, which immediately landed on his face, and the kick immediately made him fall backwards. Then the man immediately ordered his 2 friends to attack Kim Taehyun while he was off guard. Then simultaneously they, even using their strength and the skills they have, are all at level C. While when the attack was flying towards Kim Taehyun, he still didn't realize it. There was a strong attack that was about to hit him. Suddenly he was shocked when he saw that the attack was about to hit him directly, and suddenly an explosion occurred. An explosion which was strong enough to penetrate and shake the entire house. An explosion caused by the attack of the 3 of them made the entire house filled with smoke. Thinking that Taehyun had died, the man said it was retribution for someone without weaken who dared to fight them without realizing his position. However, they were surprised when they saw Kim Taehyun's shadow from behind the smoke. It turned out he was able to withstand their attacks. The system stated that the use of skills had been detected, the attacks they launched had been confirmed. Thanks to that power he was able to fight and use his skills. Even though he couldn't use his predation, he could use the stone skin skill he just got after devouring the bully's power. Instantly the man was shocked when he saw the fact that Kim Tae-hyun, who he underestimated, actually had abilities. In fact, he was so shocked that he didn't realize that Kim Tae-hyun was dashing and landed a punch so strong that it hit him so that the floor shattered. He didn't know what happened to his predation skill, but he didn't expect that the skill he was currently using was actually so strong. Kim Tae-hyun's punch made the man's face look pathetic, even making him faint as if he had been hit by a rock. Not long after that, Tae-hyun was able to beat them all so quickly and made them all faint with his punch. He also felt he had learned two things from every event he experienced after he became awakened: a status window that could only be seen by those who had awakened. And the status window displays some information from Wacken, but not everything is displayed. Until now his mana hasn't decreased in the slightest and his predation skill hasn't been activated. In other words, apart from the information displayed and information that is not displayed, factors other than mana definitely influence the user. Apart from that, the passive effect of the predation skill is also not mentioned in the skill category. The passive can neutralize skills that have abnormal status, such as poison or bleeding. Even so, he could still test his speculation as time went by because right now he still had more important things to do. When he had finished thinking about his abilities, he was amazed at what Jae-young was doing, all this time prostrating himself in front of him. He said after seeing the great side of Kim Tae-hyun as his cousin, he would admit his actions and apologize for once. Even if he has to lick his shoes or bark, he will do whatever Tae-hyun asks, but according to Tae-hyun he is very pathetic. He knew that Jae-young used to be a damn fox, but who would have thought he would be so pitiful? But the problem now is not the boy in front of him. But the problem now is that another incident will occur in the city where they live. Right on this day an incident will appear that they did not expect. Then he forgave Jae-young, who had not stopped barking like an animal. But instead Jae-young. Actually, Jae-young has to follow him now to do something while Jae-young doesn't understand what Tae-hyun is saying. Meanwhile, they move to a place not far from Tae-hyun's place where the blockades seem to have been installed along with a warning board, where no one is allowed to enter that place except the officers there. And there were also 3 officers there who were watching something that had happened in front of them, where they are witnessing a gate break, a phenomenon where monsters emerge from inside a gate that opens suddenly. If left unchecked, a dungeon disaster will occur. It's been 10 years since the last gate break. Now a gate suddenly appears and monsters emerge from inside the gate. Judging from the situation, they didn't do anything, just waited a few hours until the dungeon disaster. Should they evacuate all the residents first? However, the glasses said they didn't need to do that because he had a barrier skill that was at rank B. He felt confident that his skills could withstand all the monsters. Apart from that, the gate break level this time is only in range C. In other words, the powerful monsters that will appear from there are also of the same level. So even if the monsters finally appeared, they would still be able to deal with it. At the same time, his 2 colleagues panicked when they saw the monster put the boss in its barrier. However, in an instant, the glasses were able to sever several heads of monsters that had emerged from inside the gate with just one swing of his foot. He said he was a B ranker. They were more than enough to handle all the monsters that had emerged from within the gate. Meanwhile, Jae-young and Tae-hyun were rushing to the place where the gate break occurred. According to Jae-young, wouldn't it be a good thing if there were already several officers guarding the location? He also confirmed that the gate this time was only C rank and B rank officers were enough to handle it. So nothing will happen because the monster is also C rank. And that was Jae-young's opinion that he had been wanting to say. But according to Tae-hyun, this could happen if the gate was rank C. At the same time, the glasses had killed dozens of monsters that came out of the gate. It seemed that their group was able to handle the first wave of gate break this time. However, even though he had defeated so many monsters, the glasses still felt something strange. Why were those monsters able to break through his strongest barrier? He felt that was absolutely impossible. Was the mana that had overflowed from within the gate above his rank? Meanwhile, apart from that, they were surprised when they saw the second wave, where some monsters started to appear again. It seems that the monster this time is stronger than the previous monster. It could be seen that just one monster could damage the barrier. Those who saw this immediately panicked. So they didn't take their eyes off any of the monsters. With just his roar, the barrier was instantly shattered. This proves that the monsters this time are stronger than before. Seeing the appearance of a monster he didn't know about suddenly made the glasses panic. Until he opened his eyes wide. In the midst of their panic, they could only watch the monster tide that had been led by a huge monster. They were still silent watching what they saw without being able to act. It turned out that the monster that was able to destroy the barrier so easily was Jian Orju. Was it rank A? Seeing the level of the monster, the glasses had a cold sweat as if he was afraid. He didn't expect it to be gate range, right? But why does a monster appear? Had range in that gate at the same time an attack was flying in front of him, then a quite powerful explosion suddenly occurred, the effect of the monster's attack. Aiming right at the glasses, and neither of his colleagues knows whether they will survive or not after being hit by such a strong attack. Meanwhile, Taehyun still hasn't reached the location where he is. A gate break occurred there. Jaeyoung was curious about why Taehyun could know everything without knowing if Taehyun had experienced that in his previous life. Jaeyoung was curious why. Taehyun could tell that there were officers working on the gate, so they couldn't evacuate the residents there, but Taehyun reasoned that it was just his intuition, but Jaeyoung didn't. Believing in Taehyun's reasoning while they were talking about it, by chance they saw a group of residents trying to save themselves and trying to escape. Them from being chased by the monsters as hard as they could, they tried to get away while asking for help from being chased by a group of monsters who wanted to catch them and want to make them into food. Seeing that suddenly made Jaeyoung suddenly scared. Besides, Taehyun asked if he remembered what he said before, then he told him to leave immediately, but the Jaeyoung panicked. What about Taehyun them? Intending to save everyone from being chased by the monster before he went after it. Meanwhile, he moved to a building which was still not far from the get break location. This time there was. Someone said, if get break this time, which was previously ranked C, now becomes ranked A, not many reinforcements can be sent there because they are busy completing several dungeons, and the only solution to answer that problem there is a weaken who can solve it, where the man behind him is the only hope for them. Then he asked the man to help them save everyone. Suddenly he cried after hearing the news, and this man was a nicknamed weaken. With the nickname the Blade of Lanasai named Ahyeonso. In his tears he hoped that everyone could be saved. Bye. The hero, Junso, will soon be there to save them. At the same time, Kim Taehyun has started his action. He fights and defeats several monsters who are trying to capture the residents. That even though the monsters were at sea level, which was higher than him, he didn't feel the slightest fear in fighting against a group of monsters using his experience and also knowledge in his previous life, plus now he is a weaken, he can easily defeat all the monsters there after defeating all the monsters. So he tried his predation skill again, which he couldn't use before, but this time he could use his predation skill so he could prey on everyone. The monster's corpse, which he had defeated with one use of his skill, he had already guessed that this time he could use his skill. He also already knew one of the causes of failure. In preying on the target, it is based on the level of fatigue. If the level of fatigue reaches 70%, then the skill will not be able to be used. Conversely, if it is at 50%, then he could use his skills, and also most skills were activated based on mana usage, but of course he didn't have to worry about mana that was due to the level of fatigue. Or doing higher levels of physical activity, the strength of the skills decreases and the physical feeling becomes more difficult. There are many things to consider, but he knows that preying on monster corpses he can recover his mana without the use of mana. If the target he preys on is dead, then his mana will not be consumed, and the good thing is that his ranking is now has also changed to rank D. Even his predation and stun skin skills have both increased to rank D. he is quite happy with his skills because the more often he uses them. Predation, the greater the level of development. According to him, if it stays like that, it is possible that he could become a rank S weapon or become a rank S, or maybe he could become the first weapon to reach the triple S rank. After thinking about it, it seemed like he would be all. He felt he had finished all the monsters there without leaving a single one. Now it was time to catch up with Jae-young, but he turned around because he heard something suddenly appeared there, and it turned out that the sound was made by a rank A monster crashing into a building next to it, which was now facing rank A Yoonsok's weapon. It seems that the monster was in a cornered condition when fighting Yoonsok, who had the ability of a light sword, until the monster came to his place with cries and emotions. Passionately he said that the monster would get paid for all the people who had been killed. The hero of justice would try him. Heard that suddenly made Dayan seem surprised because his words sounded like a child's joke, while besides that the monster who had been cornered tried to give a plate. Yoonsok was about to slash his sword, but even though Yoonsok knew the attack, he did not draw his sword, but instead he used his full ability to defeat the monster. Without avoiding the blow, he immediately slashed his light sword with full force so that it hit and cut the monster's hand, and a huge explosion suddenly strong. The effect of how powerful the slash launched by Yoonsok was even made Dayan suddenly stunned when he saw how strong a rank A Aken was. He didn't expect that person to be able to defeat an A rank monster so easily. He also didn't expect that person to have completed the get break alone before he. According to the regression blade of payoff, Yoonsok is very strong, as was rumored before he regressed, but when he heard those words and also his style, according to Dayan, he could be strong. However, Taehyun was surprised why Yoonsok could be there. He faced a monster in this get break, as he remembered before he regressed. He knew that Yoonsok had a fight bleeding with the glory of the Orge. On the other hand, at the same time Yoonsok was giving prayers to all the people who had died, but at the same time Yoonsok was giving a prayer. Suddenly Taehyun felt that a very dangerous skill was approaching, and it turned out that his feeling was true, where Yoonsok, who was praying, was suddenly stabbed by someone. From behind him to his chest, the stab suddenly made him vomit red liquid, and he was also suddenly shocked to see that someone was stabbing him in the back. While putting on a psychopathic face, as if enjoying his murder attempt, he said that he saw someone who was not far from there in a room. Jaeyoung was looking at a woman who was fast asleep, who was the nurse teacher at their school. She looked so sound that he didn't even realize that a break had occurred. Seeing his teacher's condition like that made Jaeyoung seem to be filled with feelings of doubt and fear, until making him break out in a cold sweat. He briefly remembered Taehyun's words that tonight would be a lot. One of the people who died was a school nurse teacher, Kunien. In this get break, Kunien will definitely die because he was too busy helping every resident without concerned about his situation, so he told him to put Kunien to sleep with Jaeyoung's skills and evacuate him to a safe place, and Taehyun would take care of the rest to prevent events in his past repeated themselves. Remembering what Taehyun had said, he suddenly had questions in his mind how Taehyun could know everything. At first glance he thought that Taehyun had an ability that could know everything, but he denied it because it wasn't possible, but because there was no explanation regarding this matter. That he was also sure of his guess that Taehyun had a skill that could see the future of the world. Thinking of a skill like that was clearly very impressive to him, even though without. He knew Taehyun was a person who went back to the past, back to Taehyun, who was now just silent when the red liquid flashed in front of his face. He was still silent, watching a crazy psychopath who tried to murder rank A member Yunso. Besides that, Yunso stammered because he was in pain and asked who the psychopath and what his goal was, but the psychopath didn't answer. Instead, he was amazed to see that Yunso was still alive, even though the stab had hit his vital organs. That suddenly made the situation more fun, and this psychopath was an Aken Rang Bae and also a villain with skills that could hide. Its existence is said to be that they call an Aken who commits a crime villain, and behind the B rank, Evelyn is a murderous maniac who during the get break going around killing everyone to fulfill his satisfaction, but here Taehyun believes that they had never met before he regressed, neither did he understand the current pattern of life, whether the future has changed because of him. While Taehyun thinks about it, Yunso looks at the psychopath who stabbed him and He had also committed a crime that made him so angry that he decided to punish the psychopath with his own hands, but when he was about to attack him, he suddenly stopped. When they heard a roar that was so strong that it caused a violent vibration that suddenly shocked them, they stopped their fight, and it turned out the sound came from a monster that suddenly revived after being defeated by Hyun-suk, and they were also suddenly surprised because the monster was not dead yet. It turned out that the monster had a recovery ability that made it difficult to finish off. Hyun-suk didn't expect that the monster could still get back up after being hit by such a strong attack. But for the psychopath, the extraordinary ability of an A-rank monster is such a fast recovery ability, being able to restore his hand which had been cut off in an instant. After his hand recovered, the monster immediately threw a punch at them, causing a thick cloud of smoke, but they were able to avoid the blow. Seeing that the monster had fully recovered, the psychopath laughed. He decided to let the monster face Hyun-suk, then he turned with a sharp gaze at Taehyun, who had been watching them. He thought that Taehyun was just an ordinary person who was watching a show. This suddenly made him enthusiastic and wanted to satisfy his crazy desires. By killing Taehyun using the weapon he owned, this suddenly made Taehyun panic when he saw the crazy psychopath about to attack him with such enthusiasm. The psychopath immediately aimed his gun right at Taehyun's neck, but in fact Taehyun was just playing with the crazy psychopath by making a panicked face even though his attack had no effect. Whatever, it was when he hit his neck while saying that the psychopath was pathetic. He also casually kicked the psychopath in the face until red liquid came out of his mouth. The kick suddenly made the psychopath move away. He didn't expect that Taehyun was also a weakened, but what made him even more unexpected was that when Taehyun found out his name while preparing to beat him up, Taehyun said, "So the crazy psychopath who has been killing Taehyun here and they're using the ability of steel turns out to be him." He casually ordered the psychopath to come forward to face him even though he knew the psychopath was a rank B awakener, but that didn't scare him. Without further ado, Taehyun immediately landed the blow, who was immediately blocked by the psychopath's weapon. The psychopath also did not want to waste the opportunity to counterattack with his sharp weapon. He had no intention of avoiding it. Taehyun instead prepared to block the sharp weapon that was about to hit him. While withstanding every attack launched by the psychopath, Taehyun also didn't remain silent. He counterattacked with his punch even though none of the punches could hit him, but the psychopath also couldn't hurt Taehyun because his weapon couldn't cut the stone that covered his hand. After a few moments of fighting with Taehyun, he stepped back. He didn't expect that Taehyun was quite strong. The psychopath also didn't expect that his weapon wouldn't be able to cut or scratch Taehyun's body. He didn't know how Taehyun could know his name. Besides that, Hyun-seo is still fighting a monster that is constantly recovering even though she is injured. The psychopath says Taehyun must be thinking he was able to win only because his weapon didn't work, because soon Taehyun would see him unharmed. While using his skills, he continued. Taehyun had to know that this world was not created according to his wishes. Then he immediately disappeared from Taehyun's presence where he had used his skills to face Taehyun. Taehyun knew that if the psychopath disappeared, he would attack him from a point he didn't know about, but according to him the attack would not change the facts. If his weapon would be useless against Taehyun's abilities, he immediately aimed his punch in the direction he had predicted. However, he was surprised to find out that the psychopath was already behind him and his blow had only hit the wind. Suddenly he quickly turned around to block the psychopath's attack, but what happened? His attack this time injured Taehyun's hand. He didn't think how the psychopath's attack could cut through the layers of rock and injure his hand. While preparing to attack him again, he laughed. He said that there were many people like Taehyun that he had faced. They misunderstood that his skill was just to disappear. With open weakness, he could only stand by and accept every attack that was endlessly launched from all directions so quickly. When Taehyun could only hold back the attack, the psychopath said that Taehyun should understand one thing before he is killed: if all skills have a weakness. He said while giving Taehyun an attack so strong that he threw him back and saw red liquid splashing and leaving marks on the floor from Taehyun's body. And it seems that Taehyun has also been injured quite badly due to receiving so many slashes that he is tired of holding them all, but even though Taehyun's body is not injured badly enough, he was still able to get up. He didn't expect that his stone skin had such a weakness. Where his skill did not completely block an attack, the hard impact caused the stone on his skin to instantly shatter. Then the destroyed stone will be replaced with another stone with very low durability, and from the start the psychopath has been targeting the weakness of his skills. As he expected, now he could be sure that the fight could be fought even against a D rank weaken. His physical abilities were not too far from most D rank weaken. Then Taehyun asked if he could now complete this test. This question surprised the psychopath. Suddenly he immediately shot up to finish off Taehyun. He also laughed, thinking that Taehyun was very angry because he had been cornered. At the same time, Taehyun asked him the reason why he wanted to meet the crazy psychopath. But the psychopath thought Taehyun was just bragging, but the psychopath was stunned and stopped in his tracks when he saw what was overflowing so widely. From inside Taehyun's body, when he was about to use his skill, he saw Taehyun's powerful mana overflow. He thought that Taehyun had hidden his strength. However, he immediately laughed happily, thinking that Taehyun was just a fool even though he didn't know what skills Taehyun was using. He immediately used his disappearing ability to finish off Taehyun. For him, Taehyun's skill wouldn't be able to attack him if Taehyun couldn't see him. Taehyun casually asked, didn't the psychopath say that each skill had its own weakness? He realized that after several times he devoured every type of monster, and among those many monsters there were many monsters that he couldn't see. But in the end his predation skill still devoured all the monsters even though he couldn't even see. In other words, wherever the psychopath hides with the ability to disappear, wherever the psychopath tries to get away from his predation skills, his predation skill will devour the psychopath no matter what, and in the end he was able to defeat the psychopath so easily that only his weapon was left. Now the morning sun was starting to appear, illuminating the city after a long night full of events. However, at the scene, Yoon-suk was seen slumped on the ground after a full night of dealing with an orge monster that could recover. And he could defeat the monster. He also realized that he was a hero of justice, an invisible warrior who could never escape death. A death that he couldn't avoid. Eliminating the A-rank orge monster, which had the power of body recovery, was walking towards him. The big challenge is to finish off Yoon-suk, who can no longer get up, and instantly. A strong punch was hitting Yoon-suk so hard that it destroyed the ground there and created a thick cloud of smoke, but after hitting punch, the monster seemed shocked by what he saw. The monster saw that his punch only hit the ground, and even he also lost Yoon-suk, who was there. It turned out Yoon-suk had been saved by Taehyun using the abilities he got after devouring the abilities of that crazy psychopath. Kim Taehyun didn't think that Yoon-suk had fallen so quickly. However, it made him feel comfortable because he could use his predation to devour the monster while Yoon-suk was still unconscious and he couldn't stop the blow, so Yoon-suk then woke up from his fainting state. Sometime later, on a sunny morning, the city became safer after Taehyun and Yoon-suk stopped the get break. This time Uncle and I were seen too. Kim Taehyun's aunt looked so surprised after they opened the door of their house. They were surprised when they saw Kim Taehyun and Jae-hyung finally come home after waiting all night for them to return. Those who really love Taehyun and Jae-hyung suddenly shed tears. They are very worried if their nephew and child meet a monster. No. Long after a get break occurred, the news reported that the government had withdrawn warnings about the phenomenon, and the government was also considering a get break follow-up, so they decided to close the nearest school for a period of 1 week. Besides that, the 3 officers who handled the first get break were apparently still safe even though they received injuries due to being hit by an explosion. At the same time, the school nurse also seemed to be being asked for information about get break, but the nurse didn't know anything. Because when he woke up he was already in a safe place. Not only that, the public also thought that the fool Hyun-suk had defeated the Class A monster, but he admitted not himself, but the real hero is someone else, because the bodies of those who have been defeated cannot be found. People still feel afraid because security measures alone are not enough. Kim Taehyun, who had gone somewhere, also saw the news on his cell phone. smiled after hearing the news. He felt happy because no one knew that he was the one who had defeated. After seeing the news, Kim Tae-hyun decided to enter one of the dungeons that had never been discovered to start his hunt, and now his status has also increased. Previously he was at rank F, now he has reached rank D. He even has 3 skills, 2 of which are the result of devouring enemies. Getting an ability like that is quite a big achievement for him, but at his current level it was still too difficult for him to use those 3 skills. Because using a skill carelessly will only waste mana in vain, and increasing the level of fatigue will also make it impossible to do anything. So he needs the best action to overcome this carelessness, which will endanger his life. In this action he needs a potion. Potion is an elixir made for various needs, such as mana recovery. However, the price of the potion was quite expensive, so he had to hunt monsters to get more money. But to enter a dungeon he must have official permission from the authorities, therefore there's only one choice for him. This means entering a dungeon that has never been discovered so that he can carry out his hunt without having to have permission first. It can be seen that the dungeon is filled with herds of spider monsters. Inside the dungeon is filled with herds of vicious spider monsters. There are several monsters wondered why humans could come in and find them. Besides that, Taehyun didn't expect the monsters to be able to talk and whether they had fairly high intelligence. But for him, a B-level monster was still not enough to change his rank. Did he have to devour hundreds of them to improve it? Hearing that statement immediately made the monster angry. They said whether they could catch a B-grade monster? So Taehyun didn't understand this situation, so he could brag about it. Then the monsters immediately made something in their mouths. Simultaneously they shot something like poisonous smoke towards Taehyun, but Taehyun was still relaxed watching their attacks. After seeing their attacks hit Taehyun, they suddenly laughed happily. They thought that Taehyun had been hit by an attack that would make him immediately paralyzed. However, in fact the attack had no impact on Taehyun, as he deliberately received the attack to trigger his skill so he could use predation to devour them all at once without having to fight them. In the midst of their shock after seeing that his attack had no effect, Taehyun said as he expected they had something quite useful. Without waiting any longer, Taehyun immediately devoured them all alive, making the monsters screaming so loud. After devouring all the monsters there, Taehyun now gets a new skill called paralysis. Meanwhile, he moved to a building which was a player association in South Korea. In a room that is tightly closed and closely guarded by 2 officers. Inside there seemed to be 3 people who were holding a meeting to discuss an important discussion. One of them is Taehyun. The second is the deputy manager of the player association named Go Tae-wook. And the other 2 people are the best players from the player association in South Korea. It is explained that the player is an awakener who is specifically permitted to use their skills to carry out various kinds of work such as extensive exploration, clearing dungeons, and others. And currently there are 5 core players owned by the Player Association in South Korea. Only that South Korea also has 4 large guilds. One is the Guild Picker, who is tasked with various battles. The second is the Captor Guild, a guild containing great alchemists. Third is the Magus Guild, which also contains various great magicians. Fourth is the Nightwalker Guild, a Nightwalker guild whose job is to search for various information. And the authorized institution has full control in managing players, including the 4 big guilds which are player associations in New South Korea. Right in front of Gotwak right now is the guild master of the Nagwalker Guild, who is a rank S player named Yu Ayong. And also the head of the player association, who is also a rank S player named Jae Jinhui. He thanked them for coming there. Then Chairman Jae Jin asked Ayong if he found anything about the Malignant Guild. It is said that the Malignant Guild is a criminal organization formed by the most brutal criminals among the choices, and each member of the guild wears a gold ring with a skull engraved on it. Then Ayong gave a note about the guild's movements along with a list of players who were their targets, but Ayong found out if the chairman called them there, it wasn't just for the report, there must be something he wanted to ask. Hearing that, the chairman laughed. He said that he called him there to ask Ayong's opinion about something. He also seemed curious about what the chairman wanted to ask him. Then the chairman asked when Ayong took the player exam, and Ayong said that since he was 19 years old he had already qualified. But he had time to realize why the head of the association would ask him such a thing. Suddenly the chairman smiled and asked whether Ayong thought a high school student could defeat a monster in a fight. Meanwhile, Taehyun is now sitting relaxed on a pile of monster corpses while taking a mana stun after completing the dungeon. It seems he has gotten a lot of mana stun from the corpses of the monsters, and he is also seen crying at the truth of what happened to Ayong, and he is also seen contacting one of the 4 big guilds, where he contacted the Alchemist Guild to buy potions with stun mana that had been collected from the corpses of the monsters 7 days later after the get break had ended. Now the school has reopened after being closed for a full week, activities during the 7-day school holiday. He did exercises to increase his body's strength with Jaehyung. Not only that, Taehyun also cried with the truth about what happened to Ayong because he also entered several dungeons without his uncle and aunt knowing. He also accomplished everything so easily in a building belonging to one of the 4 major alchemist guilds. Several people were immediately stunned after seeing the large amount of stun mana that Taehyun was carrying. To make Taehyun a SBP, to make an agreement with their alchemist guild, and also now Taehyun's status has risen from the 4 big guilds to make an agreement with their alchemist guild. So quickly he has reached rank S with 4 skills that are at the same level, but according to him he still has a long way to go because he has just reached rank S. And again he has to go to school to carry out his activities, where at school he is only seen as someone who is not yet awakened by his friends. Even all his friends couldn't believe whether Kim Taehyun had awakened after they heard the news that Taehyun had betrayed Yukso's gang. According to them, Kim Taehyun is currently in big trouble. Because he has defeated Yukso, the people above Yukso will not remain silent. When they talk about this, suddenly 3 other students were coming there. Taehyun also glanced at the 3 people who were coming to his place, and they immediately threw a tantrum by smashing several chairs and tables in the class. Then a man who was escorted by his 2 friends, suddenly sitting up with his feet up on Taehyun's table, he said he hadn't seen Taehyun for a long time. He also called Taehyun his friend. He is an Auken Rings named Leeji. It is said that Leeji was sponsored by a rich family from the 3rd generation Taisun group, and he is also the strongest leader in high school. Before he regressed, Kim Taehyun always received unpleasant treatment. He was always beaten for no reason by other students, where Leeji controlled other students, including Bae Yuxeo, to bully him because he was the strongest Auken. Leeji became the main culprit behind all of that by making Bae Yuxeo his henchman to bully Taehyun. Hearing the word garden from Leeji's trash mouth suddenly made Leeji say, Leeji made Taehyun laugh about it. While giving a look of hatred and intimidation, he also told Leeji to get out of his presence using harsh words, seeing Taehyun's disrespectful attitude towards Leeji. This suddenly made his subordinate very annoyed, but Leeji asked if his subordinate didn't know who he was talking to. Then he landed a hard punch on his subordinate's face. This caused bleeding. As he got up from his seat, Leeji told his subordinates to be quiet because he was currently talking to his friend Taehyun. Apart from that, Taehyun still looked relaxed while watching the behavior of the punks who were always causing chaos. Suddenly Leeji laughed while saying that Taehyun was so arrogant. Just because he beat Bae Yuxeo, then he also put out a little ability to intimidate Taehyun, while saying that Taehyun couldn't talk to Leeji. Leeji had to know who he had to face. Seeing the power released by Leeji, Taehyun suddenly felt impressed with the power of an Auken Rings when Taehyun thought about that ability. Leeji told him to listen to his words as long as he still asks Taehyun nicely. Behind his pocket, Taehyun intends to use his predation. He is curious about what will happen if his predation was against Ring's abilities, but suddenly a Leeji discovered his strength and a woman came there while using her abilities to stop Leeji and drive him away. And the woman immediately beat 2 of Leeji's friends using her ice abilities so that they felt the cold temperature around them. Leeji didn't just stop them, but he also told Taehyun to stop his behavior. He only laughed a little in response to that because he felt like he wasn't doing anything and he was Lim Ayong. A leader who has abilities, who is also an S-class Oken, and he is also the son of a rich family as well as the half-brother of Yoyong, and he is also a candidate from SS players in the future. Many nicknames have been given to her and many more will come in the future. Taehyun thinks that this woman will never know how. The way he stepped back even though he was facing Lee Ji said it seemed like he had misunderstood that he was just talking to his old friend, but Lim Iong knew that. Lee Ji intended to hit Taehyun with his fiery blows. By using his sharp stance he also told the woman not to cross the line in her words. But that woman, telling Lee Ji to be quiet. He would force Lee Ji if he didn't immediately leave there. Seeing the hostility between the owners of the powers of fire and ice made Taehyun panic. Because they could make the class a mess, at first glance the two of them seemed to be looking at each other with eyes that showed hostility between them. After a while, looking at each other, Lee Ji turned around. He left them because he didn't want to fight Lim Iong, but he knew that Lee Ji's words were just lies. When he saw Lee Ji's hands began to emit fire. Regardless of who his opponent was, Lee Ji intended to beat Lim Iong with his abilities, and Lim Iong also seemed ready to fight him. When they were preparing to fight each other, suddenly they stopped. When they heard an announcement at school, Taehyun looked surprised to see the two of them suddenly stop. Even though he would witness how Oken Rings pitted his abilities, the announcement said there would be special classes for all students held by other associations. Lee Ji was wondering about what classes the association would hold, so that they gathered all the students. For a moment Lee Ji saw Taehyun, who was still sitting relaxed, without doing anything, and Lim Iong, who was still preparing to fight him. Suddenly he laughed slyly as if he was planning something to teach Taehyun a lesson. Then he left, while saying, "Let's just say Taehyun is lucky this time." Then he left even though Lee Ji was gone, but he was still in his fighting position. At the same time he heard a sound behind him. Then he turned around while asking about Taehyun's condition. He thought that Taehyun wanted to thank him, but unexpectedly Taehyun was no longer in his seat. In fact, he didn't even see her pass by. It turned out that Taehyun was already behind her. He asked what the woman was doing. Didn't he hear the announcement? Then he would go first. After seeing Taehyun's cold attitude, he suddenly wondered, as if he didn't expect, whether Taehyun was always like that. A few moments later, all the students have now gathered in the meeting hall to take a special class held by the association. They were wondering whether the class was held to discuss getting a break. What recently happened. Then Go Taewak, as the deputy association manager, he explained two reasons for coming there. First of all, he wanted to apologize on behalf of the association for get break. A moment before saying the second reason, Go Taewak had time to use his abilities. Then he said the second reason, which are all students, which will be the future of the country. They will take part in the player trial. When they hear a speech from Go Taewak, Rajai still felt very annoyed because he couldn't take part in the player trial, which taught Taehyun a lesson. Lim Iong also had time to think about Taehyun's attitude, so he intended to meet Taehyun later, while Taehyun kept yawning as if he was bored and sleepy. After attending a class held by the association, when they heard that, they suddenly wondered what this had to do with them. Isn't the player trial only for those who are old? 19 years old and above, they can't even participate this year. Go Taewak said they all probably think it has nothing to do with them, that's why he's there. To explain everything to them as they know, with incidents such as get breaks and the increase in monsters and dungeons, the player association admitting that they lack members, so from now onwards high school students can get recommendations to become players. When they heard that, some of the students immediately seemed to be related to material players. They didn't think that they could join the player material, where they would be selected based on an evaluation of the ability scores, academic achievements, and behavior of each school. But Taehyun knows that all the students there will indeed take it, but the selection has been going on since Go Taewak started the meeting. He has been using his abilities since Go Taewak said all about the material player's abilities. An ability called Eye of the Observer, which can see and calculate the total abilities against, and even information about the opponent's status, especially all the students there. Go Taewak deliberately used his abilities to see their ability level without all the students there knowing. Exactly as he expected. All the students there had better grades than the others. According to him, they would become great players. But among them all he saw were several students. The most surprising thing for him is Lejai and Auken rings with an ability level of 1924 and another one is Lim Ayong, which is also weakened rings with a power of 2,335. Previously Go Taewok received a player adapter from Yo Ayong. But who would have thought that he would find an untrained Auken who had such high grades? Seeing his best abilities, he intended to write a recommendation for the two of them after he returned to the association. At the same time, Lejai suddenly raised his hand. He wanted to say something to Go Taewok about the player. Look, Go Taewok was wondering. What did Lejai want to convey? Then Lejai said that Go Taewok had briefed them about the players, but wasn't there someone inappropriate there? According to what he knows, the player who received the player adapter was Lejai, and the main thing is a test to determine whether an awakener is eligible to become a player. It seems that this is not needed for a non-awakener to be there, and Lejai's words were directed at none other than Taehyun, who he thought had not yet awakened. It was said that being strong was not everything for players. Of course, the level of awareness is more important, but so is the ability to adapt to various situations and extensive knowledge. Of course, the level of awareness is more important. And also to become a player, a person is required to be tested on that combined ability. But for Lejai, it still comes from awakening. And it was painful for non-awakened to listen to Lejai's words while looking down on Taehyun. Besides that, Taehyun felt annoyed with Lejai, who deliberately did that just to check whether he had woken up. Lejai also said in his mind that Lejai couldn't find Auken or if Taehyun had indeed awakened. So prove it to everyone there. Meanwhile, besides that, Lim Ayong heard Taehyun's derogatory words, which immediately made Lim Ayong annoyed. So he tried to stop Lejai's attitude, but with a cold attitude. Taehyun asked what Lim Ayong was doing. He didn't need his help. This also made Lim Ayong so annoyed with his cold attitude that he turned around and let Taehyun do as he pleased. Then Lim Ayong said that he wanted to leave there as soon as possible. And Go Taewok said that they were free to avoid class or not. Lejai said Go Taewok's words again to embarrass Taehyun, who had been silent without responding to his ramblings. Lejai also added that he was not nominated as a non-awaken. Or whether Taehyun doesn't care about Tyrael players. In Taehyun's mind said that was impossible. If he can't prove that he is weakened, then he won't even be able to see the Tyrael player, but arrogance is not the only way to be recommended. At the same time, Go Taewok's abilities seemed to be watching them. Among the many students, the three of them were the ones he had been observing with his abilities. He had guessed that the student who couldn't find the Tyrael player and who used pathetic intimidation was Lejai, an S-rank weaken, and Kim Taehyun, who was said by the student council that he was a non-weaken who had unknown potential, who was also a pitiful student compared to other weaken. But when Go Taewok wanted to see his level of ability, his skill couldn't see Taehyun's ability level. This immediately surprised him. He didn't know why his skill couldn't find a Tyrael player who could see the ability level of a non-weaken. At the same time, Taehyun responded to Lejai's chatter. He said loudly that he was truly pathetic. Non-weaken didn't need to hear an explanation like that. And that would only hurt Lejai's heart without any results. Lejai didn't understand what Taehyun was saying. Taehyun also said that he would leave from there. There is no benefit for a non-weaken to take that class. Then Lejai found a Tyrael player who couldn't find a Tyrael player. Then Taehyun raised his middle finger at Lejai. He said, "Stay here and listen to your noble class." Instantly, this made Lejai very annoyed after hearing Taehyun's words, which seemed to belittle him. Besides that, Go Taewok still couldn't imagine how it was possible that his vision skills couldn't see Taehyun's strength level. Even the strongest player like the head of the association, he could see his strength level, and he had never seen Taehyun's strength who couldn't find a Tyrael player. He had never found anything wrong when looking at the strength level of other strong players. That never happened. But how could his eyesight not be able to see a kid like Taehyun at all? Until now, Go Taewok still can't believe how something like that could happen to Taehyun. Because he was so curious about his views and also Go Taewok's skills, he couldn't stop observing Taehyun. Yang was currently about to leave the class. But no matter how hard Go Taewok's vision ability tried, his ability still couldn't show what Taehyun had. Until Taehyun turned around before leaving the class, by chance Godi Wak's skill was looking for data about Taehyun. Immediately Godi Wak opened his eyes very wide. It was as if he saw something more surprising in Taehyun. It turned out that before Taehyun left the class he had shown his strength. So Godi Wak was immediately shocked when he saw Taehyun's strength level which exceeded the other Oken, reaching 5,000. A few moments later he moved to a library which looked very quiet. There Taehyun was reading every book to look for clues about the king, which gave him the power of predation. Ignoring the 3 people who came there, after finishing reading the book he looked at the 3 people who had been looking for clues about the king. The 3 students were Lejai bandits who were deliberately ordered to meet Taehyun. They were ordered by Lejai to take Taehyun somewhere. What Lejai had been waiting for no matter what, but Taehyun refused their invitation and went back to reading the book in his hand without paying attention to them. However, the man in the middle said something about Taehyun's aunt who ran a restaurant. Making Taehyun surprised, Taehyun suddenly asked what the man had said, to which Lejai told them to tell Taehyun about his aunt. In a condescending tone, the man said that Taehyun was just an orphan. Did Taehyun want to cause more trouble for his aunt who was currently having difficulties? Those words immediately made Taehyun angry. He immediately threw a strong punch when the man said that. If they were to take Taehyun somewhere by force, and immediately the effect of Taehyun's strong blow created a large explosion that broke the library window. The effect of Taehyun's punch not only damaged the window, but Taehyun's punch also destroyed the entire library until it became a pile of rubble. Taehyun didn't hesitate to make the man endure the pain by strangling his neck until the man was lifted up. Taehyun asked, "Don't make himself wonder twice." Apart from that, the man's 2 friends were stunned by the condition sad. In the middle of the books that were scattered on the floor. While strengthening his grip, Taehyun gave a sharp gaze. Accompanied by mounting emotions, he asked where Liji was. A few moments later he moved to the place previously used by Godi Wak, held additional classes for students there. This place is a quiet place which is only used when there are extra classes. Kim Taehyun came there to meet Liji who was waiting for him. He seems to be accompanied by a bodyguard who is also an awakener. Using his abilities, the bodyguard tries to do something ordered by Liji. The guard was a rank A player named Solhan. He said that since Taehyun came there they had used some unusual skills. It turned out that the guard was trying. Feeling an unusual level through the overflow of his mana that Taehyun had not lowered since he arrived there, the guard guessed that Taehyun was a rank A awakener. After finding out that Taehyun had woken up, it made Liji happy. He walked over to invite Taehyun to chat. Apart from that, Taehyun only watched Liji with feelings of hatred. Without saying anything, Liji said that maybe he was rude to Taehyun, but he didn't mean to be condescending. He said he was just thinking about looking for Taehyun with his arrogant attitude. Liji said his goal was to build a guild as a successor to the foundation group after graduating from school, but even a genius like him couldn't do it all alone. He also asked if Taehyun knew what was needed for him to achieve his goals, which he needed someone who was talented, not a loser like Baek-sik. But as someone who was very talented, he appointed Taehyun and said that the talented person he needed was Taehyun. If Taehyun would forget the past and join him, then Taehyun will get wealth and honor so easily. Not only that, even Taehyun's family will also be able to escape from their dirty life. However, Taehyun flatly refuses. All of Liji's invitations made Liji surprised and stopped his boasting. Taehyun said that Liji couldn't refuse. Liji stopped his boasting. He said that he didn't need the wealth and honor that Liji offered. While using his abilities to fight Liji, who is a weakening S-rank, Taehyun said that Liji's actions had gone too far. As if surprised, Liji didn't say anything. When he saw the ability that Taehyun was using, he smiled briefly, confirming what Taehyun said, then he also used his power. While wearing a happy face, an animal needs to be taught first so that it understands. Apart from that, Liji's subordinates also used their abilities. He used his ability to create a barrier skill that created a magical room where the magical aura in the room could not be detected from the outside. The barrier immediately covered the entire room without leaving the slightest gap with the barrier he had created. No one else could know how strong Li Ji's fight with Taehyun was. After creating a barrier, he watched Li Ji's fight with Taehyun. At this time both of them were lunging at each other. With emotions running high at Li Ji, who had gone too far, Taehyun clenched his fist to land a strong blow. Li Ji also didn't hesitate to use his abilities to teach Taehyun a lesson, who had rejected his invitation, and immediately they threw a strong punch at each other. The strong punches that collided with each other created an explosive wave between them, but it seemed that Li Ji's punch was stronger than Taehyun's punch. It can be seen that Li Ji's punch is able to destroy the rock's hard skin. And also the strong blow that destroyed his stone hand made Taehyun feel pain in his hand. But before Taehyun had time to recover, his hands and feet touched the floor. Li Ji was ready to land a kick with his feet covered in flames. Instantly a strong fire kick landed right on Taehyun without being able to avoid it, causing him to hit so hard that it caused an explosion. Even the strong kick given by Li Ji immediately made Taehyun vomit red liquid from his mouth. While preparing to land his attack again, Li Ji laughed and asked whether Taehyun finally understood his position. And they attacked again, causing a series of explosions to suddenly occur in that place, which was currently witnessed by Li Ji's bodyguards. Watching their fight made him feel pity. For example, Li Ji thinks Taehyun might be a weakened Ranga with body-strengthening abilities. With the will to fight and also the mental strength that a student doesn't have, Taehyun might be able to find a worthy opponent. But his current opponent is Li Ji, a great talent with weakened class A. At the same time, Taehyun is in a disadvantageous situation. He was surprised when his blow was blocked so easily. However, at that time, Li Ji not only blocked Taehyun's punch, he also prepared a strong attack with his left hand, where Li Ji gave a burst of fire so strong through the palm of his hand that the fire hit Taehyun right in the face. Meanwhile, the bodyguard saw Taehyun cornered by Li Ji. He thought that Taehyun would not be able to win against him. However, he was shocked when he saw the situation before him. It turned out that Li Ji no longer used his fire abilities, so he faced Taehyun with his bare hands. And gradually Li Ji's movements seemed to weaken until his punches didn't have any impact on Taehyun. Even Li Ji was hit several times by Taehyun, even though he was still able to withstand the blows. But in the end Li Ji couldn't block Taehyun's punch, and Taehyun's next punch hit Li Ji heavily in the face, to the point that Li Ji fell and hit the floor so hard by Taehyun's punch. Witnessing this immediately made his bodyguards not believe how Li Ji could be cornered by Taehyun. Even Li Ji couldn't believe that when he had cornered Taehyun, he had now turned into Taehyun cornering him. Suddenly that time made him so annoyed he didn't know what Taehyun was doing that his body couldn't move. The bodyguard also didn't understand why Li Ji couldn't move his body. He thought about whether Taehyun's ability was just body strengthening, but how could Taehyun make Li Ji unable to move? What Taehyun has done. With his head injured by Li Ji's attack, Taehyun clenched his fists and said that Li Ji was currently in trouble. Previously Taehyun had obtained 3 skills. His first predation was the stun skin he got from Byuxo. The second is steel, which he got after devouring a crazy psychopath. And third is the paralysis he got from the spider monster. But from the start, Taehyun didn't use all his skills and his ability couldn't penetrate the S-class defense easily. Its disappearing ability can also be removed very easily by area fire attacks. And also his predation skill should only be used as a last resort. So Taehyun aims to provide paralysis through close combat. The effect will be greater if it is a direct physical attack, which means that by relentlessly attacking, it will cause paralysis to penetrate Li Ji even with high resistance. In several attacks, his skills were able to withstand weakening Li Ji's body. Although it can't weaken Li Ji for long, but at least he can knock Li Ji down so he can't get back up without having to use his predation skills. Seeing Li Ji's condition and Taehyun's abilities made the bodyguard stunned, to the point that it made him break out in a cold sweat. He concluded that Taehyun was a genius who could go head-to-head with Li Ji, even surpassing his level of strength. However, the fight is not over yet because Li Ji is not the type of person who will just accept defeat. Li Ji laughed and said that he recognized Taehyun's strength. While taking out an item, he said it seemed like he was underestimating Taehyun. He also couldn't possibly lose to someone like Taehyun. Then he pressed the item with his finger as hard as he could, until the item was suddenly destroyed, and produces a special effect from the fragments. This suddenly surprised Taehyun when he saw something in front of him. It turned out that Kim Taehyun was surprised when he saw Lejai awaken his full strength after using the item. He formed a powerful fire force into a giant fireman. Even part of Lejai's body was covered in strong fire. While laughing, he said that this time he would face Taehyun seriously. Seeing how dangerous Lejai's power was, Kim Taehyun immediately moved away so he wouldn't be hit by Lejai's attack. When Taehyun tried to move away, Lejai tried to throw a powerful and hot fire punch from behind Taehyun. Before the powerful blow hit Taehyun, he used the opportunity as much as possible to avoid the blow. Using a protective wall, he jumped up to avoid Lejai's blow. He also made his stone hands bigger to provide counterattacks. When Kim Taehyun jumped high, Lejai's punch immediately hit the floor, destroying the floor. He knew that with Lejai's current form of power, Lejai's movements would be limited, so he intended to deliver a crushing blow while he was distracted. However, even though Lejai's movements are limited, the true form of his fire power is capable of emitting very strong flames. At the same time, Taehyun tried to throw a strong punch at the creature, but the burst of fire was so strong that it was able to withstand Taehyun's blow. Not only did he withstand Taehyun's blow, but the very hot fire slowly burned his stone hand. In the end, no matter how hard Taehyun tried to penetrate Lejai's defense, his stone hands couldn't withstand the heat of the fire. So the stone covering Taehyun's hands suddenly shattered and caused a strong explosion which immediately threw Taehyun very far, until he shrank to the floor with his body already burned due to the heat of Lejai's fire. At this time Taehyun was cornered again. The surrounding area was also filled with fire. And the fire that Lejai is currently using is a perfect manifestation of Lejai's Plemmer power, which is at level S. His bodyguard knew that even though Lejai was an S-level weakened with his current strength, it would be difficult for Lejai to unleash the full power of his skills. But what Lejai used was an item called Magic Amplification Stone, which object was made through one of the most difficult methods, namely by refining the Demon Heart Stone. The use of this item can increase the power of magic for the user until it exceeds the limit of its power for a while. With this item, even a weakened at Lejai's current level can use the full power of his S-level skills. But what made the bodyguard panic was not the power used by Lejai, but there was more to the problem than that. He immediately shouted like that and Lejai tried to stop his attack. He asked whether Lejai intended to kill Kim Taehyun with his power. The power was also too strong for Lejai to control. If you are not careful, the surge of power could explode all the blood vessels in Lejai's body. When his bodyguard informed Lejai, Lejai suddenly fired a shot at the bodyguard. Suddenly he dodged the shot which immediately hit his barrier. Lejai took a damage to his barrier. He was so angry with Taehyun, he told his bodyguards to be quiet. To Lejai, a lowly guard like him was unfit to advise him. He also said that after all the insults he got from a loser like Taehyun, there was no way he would just let it go. At the same time Taehyun tried to get back up. But when he got up, he suddenly saw an attack heading straight for him. And immediately Lejai's punch hit Taehyun hard, causing a very strong explosion. The explosion also instantly tore a hole in the floor and also destroyed the barrier covering the place. Seeing his punch hit Taehyun straight away immediately made Lejai laugh as if he was happy to be able to finish off Taehyun with his strength. This suddenly made his bodyguards panic when they saw that Lejai had lost his mind. He didn't know what he should do to deal with all the damage. Then he approached Taehyun, who was currently in a hole. He suggested that Taehyun give up and get out of there while he could. While providing help to Taehyun, he also said that he would stop Lejai somehow for the better. But he didn't have time to finish his words. However, in the end, Taehyun first landed a punch that hit him hard in the face. So Taehyun's punch made his nose bleed and threw him very far from Taehyun's front. From behind the smoke, Taehyun said that after all the damage done by Lejai, how could he just leave? It seems that Taehyun has also used several potions to repair all the damage to his body. While using his predation ability, Taehyun said he admitted that S-level strength was indeed extraordinary. So he will also use all his strength to defeat Lejai. Meanwhile, it moved to the Player Association building in South Korea. There Go Tae-wook was facing the association chairman to report what he found after he held a meeting at Kim Taehyun's school. The chairman was immediately shocked as if he couldn't believe it after finding out that Go Tae-wook had won. Go Tae-wook found 2 students whose ability level exceeded the other Aken. Go Tae-wook said that the child's name was Lejai and also Lim A-young. They were both confirmed as S-rank awakeners. Go Tae-wook said that the child's name was Lejai and also Lim A-young. They were both confirmed as S-rank awakeners. Can South Korea finally produce a player at Sane's level? And Go Tae-wook seems to be thinking about that. Sane is one of the representative players from Japan, a monster who is able to get numbers above 2,500. When tested for the first time when he was 19 years old, that person was able to gain an ability level that exceeded 2,500. But he still thought about the level of ability that surpassed that of a monster, namely Taehyun's level of strength, which even exceeded that of Sane and other awakeners. And he also hasn't reported Taehyun's strength level to the chairman. He was afraid that it was just a mistake in the scenario. He intends to confirm directly whether a mistake or whatever it is, he will confirm it with his own eyes. Meanwhile, at the scene of Taehyun's fight with Lejai, it seemed that the guard was looking at him in surprise. He was so shocked and couldn't believe it after seeing it. See an ability he's never seen before. It turns out that currently Kim Taehyun is using his predation ability to bind Lejai's fire power so that Lejai cannot use his power. It even made his bodyguards bow down weakly when they saw Taehyun's strength. Taehyun's predation seemed to be able to easily paralyze the very hot fire as if Lejai's fire power was swallowed by his predation. While maintaining the power of his fire, which was currently about to be devoured by Taehyun, he couldn't believe it and wondered why Taehyun could do that. He also asked why it could be like this. He couldn't possibly lose to a trash like Taehyun because he was Taesun's heir. Then he returned to using all his remaining strength while saying loudly that he was the strongest S-class Awakener in the school. Along with a scream of hatred at Taehyun, he again shaped his fire into an animal head that would attack Taehyun. With his sanity, Taehyun said whether it was an S-class, heir, or Aken, for him it was not important when dealing with him. While laughing, Taehyun used his predation to defeat Lejai. He said that he would show Lejai. And his predation immediately devoured all the fire around Lejai. But Lejai didn't want to lose, he still tried to fight Taehyun. However, he suddenly stopped when he saw a strong and large entity in the sky currently directing its palm towards Lejai. Taehyun said he would show the strength of a king. This suddenly shocked Lejai after seeing a huge force about to hit him. He also suddenly broke out in cold sweat in fear until he couldn't move away as if he was under intense pressure. And Taehyun's attack immediately hit Lejai. The place seemed to be in a calm state without anyone knowing that there was a battle in the room. Until the calm became chaos where Taehyun's powerful attack hit Lejai and instantly blew up the place. A very powerful explosion would likely destroy the place as well. It seemed that the powerful explosion caused by Taehyun's power not only caused sparks but the explosion also instantly destroyed the entire place. And Lejai is currently being fainted with his face covered in wounds. Judging from Lejai's condition, it seemed like he wasn't completely hit by Taehyun's power blow. Nearby was Lejai's subordinate Solhan, sweating and shaking. He just looked at Taehyun without saying anything as if he was afraid after seeing how strong Taehyun was. Seeing the situation in front of him now, Taehyun felt that it was a truly surprising situation for him. What was surprising was the moment when Solhan, who was Lejai's subordinate, struggled to protect his master, regardless of the condition of his body. In Taehyun's mind, who would have thought that a Class A player would try to pull Lejai to save him? In the midst of a fairly strong roar of predation. He thought it was a great act. But for Taehyun it wasn't important because he had also gotten Lejai's skills. While Taehyun was thinking about that, Solhan asked what Taehyun's plans were at the moment. Lejai is Taesan's young master, how will Taehyun handle it after that incident? Instead of answering his question, Taehyun told him to look at who had started the problem. Not only that, Taehyun also asked if he looked like someone who could be bullied like that. It seemed that the fire caused by the explosion was getting bigger and bigger. At the same time, Taehyun told Seoul Honorable that he had no intention of killing Lee Ji. Instead of wanting to kill Lee Ji, he would just take bail money for what Lee Ji did. Hearing that suddenly made Seoul Han very surprised. In the midst of his surprise, Taehyun said that after all, Lee Ji was Tae-san's young master. While smiling slyly, Taehyun thought about how much money he would ask for as collateral. After thinking about that, Taehyun said again, "Isn't Lee Ji's money worth at least 1 billion won?" When Taehyun discussed the issue of collateral, the children at the school started to arrive to see the situation there. They wondered what had happened to the gaming venue and whether it was caused by a monster. However, Lim Mayong knew that it was not caused by a monster. A strong sensation of mana and fire was definitely Lee Ji's power. But he didn't know who he was fighting. At first glance, he imagined how Lee Ji would beat Taehyun with the power of his fire. And Taehyun just asked for help like a naughty child. After imagining Taehyun's situation being in danger, suddenly he rushed to look there. While the homeroom teacher tried to calm them down, without listening to the homeroom teacher who tried to stop him, he rushed to help Taehyun. It seemed that the fire burning that place was getting bigger and bigger. And Lim Mayong didn't care about that. He also thought that all this time he had misunderstood the situation, not only about what he saw in the game. He felt it was all his fault. While using his ice powers to withstand the very hot fire, in his mind he was begging Taehyun to stay alive. After arriving there, he saw Lee Ji currently unconscious in a very sad condition. And also Taehyun's situation, who had received a wound on his head, but he was still acting relaxed as if nothing had happened. And it seems that Seoul Han is also no longer there. For a moment he was just silent, looking at Lee Ji and Taehyun's condition. He seemed so surprised when he saw the situation there. In the midst of Lim A-yong's shock, Taehyun said that Lim A-yong was an eyewitness. But he quickly changed his words by saying that Lim A-yong would take Lee Ji for treatment. Seeing Lee Ji's condition, Lim A-yong suddenly asked what had happened. But Taehyun said that he found Lee Ji had fainted, probably from falling down the stairs or something. Hearing that made him seem like he couldn't believe it. Taehyun said that he didn't know anything. So don't say that Lim A-yong saw him there. Realizing how Lee Ji might fall from the stairs, he immediately stopped Taehyun. He asks her to explain everything properly. However, when he looked at Taehyun's place, it turned out that Taehyun was no longer there. And that surprised him again. How could Taehyun disappear from sight so quickly? It turns out Taehyun used his disappearing ability to leave that place without anyone knowing. For a moment, he felt relieved because Lee Ji had been resolved by Lim A-yong, and Tae-san's problem had also been resolved. He also asked if everything was finished. Then he opened his status window to find out what his status was after he devoured Lee Ji's power. His status has increased, and he also gets a skill called Super Rigor, which can increase the status of party members. However, he was surprised why in his status he got a status called Persona, which status is a beauty status that only most celebrities have. Why did he get that after devouring Lee Ji? Plus the abilities he got from Lee Ji. Not Plemmer, but he got the Super Rigor skill, an ability that increases the status of party members. He also wondered whether Lee Ji had this ability all along. Suddenly he was very happy. He thought it was quite great because the skill could affect all students no matter their level, and that was quite rare. And for those who would be using multiple abilities, a useful ability like Super Rigor was much better. And he also didn't expect that after devouring Lee Ji he would get a jackpot that he didn't expect. At the same time, several cars suddenly stopped in front of Taehyun as if Taehyun was the perpetrator of the crime. Seeing his situation surrounded by several cars suddenly made him very surprised. It turns out it was Go Tae-wook who was bringing several association officers. He said he finally found Kim Taehyun. There were many things he wanted to ask Taehyun. Meanwhile, Taehyun was just silent in his mind, wondering why Go Tae-wook was there. While using his vision ability, he asked what Taehyun was doing while he was at Jim's place. Meanwhile, he moved to a residence that looked very majestic. There a man was holding a glass of drink while saying, so the conclusion is that his only child is now in the hospital. Plus the perpetrator asked for money. There were also wild animals there that could eat the man at any time. While sitting relaxed escorted by wild animals, the man asked for compensation of 1 billion won and a request to handle the situation calmly. It turns out that Sol Han is currently conveying what Tae Hyun asked for when he finally defeated Lee Jae. It turns out that Sol Han is currently conveying what Lee Jae asked for in the end. With a shaking body and cold sweat, he apologized. He didn't know what to say, but his boss told him to do what Tae Hyun asked. In a surprised tone, he immediately apologized whether his boss was not wrong in saying that. His boss suddenly laughed. He said that it was really brave. But he wouldn't let it go for free. No matter how much he paid, there should be a reward for them. But he wouldn't let it go for free. No matter how much he paid, there should be a reward for them. And then he snapped his fingers to summon someone. Suddenly this made Sol Han very surprised when he saw the shadows of two people coming there. Then he said that their enemy was just a child and that it was too much to handle. While using strong intimidation, he denied it and said that he would not spare a beast that teased him incessantly. Putting on a scary look, he smiled. It turns out he is Lee Jae-yong-so, an S-level player and the president of the Tae-san group and Lee Jae's father. Back to Tae-hyun, who is currently confused about Go Tae-wook's question about what he does in the game. He was confused as to whether perhaps what Go Tae-wook was asking about was a game that experienced an explosion due to his actions. Or when he showed his level of ability at a meeting in the gaming hall. He finds out Go Tae-wook is a senior officer at the association. There was no way he was there just because there was a fire. But if he already knows that he is the culprit, he has no other choice but to test Go Tae-wook. Then he asked if what Go Tae-wook was asking about was a game, did he mean about an explosion? But it seems that Go Tae-wook didn't ask about the explosion in the game and he didn't seem to know anything about it. While turning to that place, he said what he meant was the fire there. It's not a problem and other agencies can handle it. Judging from his words, Tae-hyun realized that Go Tae-wook didn't seem to know anything regarding the explosion he made in the game. And he also smiled. He finds out that Go Tae-wook doesn't know anything about the explosion he made in the game. But Go Tae-wook asked what he was doing in the meeting hall. After finding out that, Tae-hyun asked whether Go Tae-wook already knew what he was doing in the game. However, Go Tae-wook asked that as if he didn't know. Then Tae-hyun asked whether Go Tae-wook had come there to invite him to join the serial player. Hearing that, he suddenly laughed. He asked on what basis Tae-hyun could say that. Go Tae-wook's tone of voice seemed to make Tae-hyun feel challenged to show his abilities. Then he showed his level of ability not only to Go Tae-wook but to the others too. He asked if what he was showing now was enough for Go Tae-wook. Seeing Tae-hyun's level of strength immediately made Go Tae-wook and the others suddenly stunned as if they couldn't believe it. Go Tae-wook didn't seem to believe it. Tae-hyun's level of ability became stronger than when he saw him in the assembly hall. After seeing his abilities, Go Tae-wook realized that what he saw at that time was not a coincidence or a mistake. He wondered who Tae-hyun's true identity was. But he also wondered why Tae-hyun's clothes were like that. And that question immediately broke the atmosphere in that place. Long story short, we moved to Tae-hyun's residence. There someone was surprised when they heard the name of the serial player. It turns out that Tae-hyun told Jae-young that he would be taking part in a serial player which would be held in a month. And this immediately shocked Jae-young. He didn't expect Tae-hyun to be able to follow the serial player so easily. He thought Tae-hyun was so great that he prostrated himself in front of Tae-hyun while praising him by calling Tae-hyun the Great Emperor. Tae-hyun thinks that Jae-young is teasing him. Tae-hyun thought that Tae-san would handle the game problem well. And he should be able to overcome Go Tae-wook's suspicions. So he will focus on training until that time comes. According to him, there will be no more problems. While he was thinking that, suddenly his cell phone received an incoming call. The call came from someone unknown. At the same time, it seems that two assistants are observing Tae-hyun's residence. They are black and white who are ranked criminals. After observing Tae-hyun's residence for a long time, White suddenly beat someone. Which person is an association officer who guards Taehyun's residence? While strangling the person, White asked why the association officers were guarding the residence of a child like Taehyun. Then Black said it was possible that Taehyun was one of the real player participants. So the association will definitely look after their very promising talents. However, for White, the talent was just a beginner who didn't have any experience. And Black also confirmed this, that promising talent is useless if you don't have very supporting experience. With great enthusiasm, he invited White to show him what is the real weapon in a very promising talent. But when he looked back, it turned out that Taehyun was hitting White mercilessly. And that immediately shocked him. Seeing that his younger brother had been beaten by Taehyun suddenly made the black man very angry. He immediately prepared to fight him while asking who Taehyun was. After finishing hitting the white guy until he fainted, Taehyun turned to the black guy, smiling. He responded to her question. Just as the black one was about to attack Taehyun, something suddenly shot straight at him without him being able to avoid it. To which Taehyun moved as fast as possible and smashed his knee, which was covered in stone, on the black man's face. And Taehyun's blow was so hard that it made the black man's face suddenly ooze red liquid. Then Taehyun told the black man that he was just a beginner who had no experience. A glimpse was shown a few hours ago when Taehyun was still at the gaming venue after beating Leeji. There Kim Taehyun had asked for 10 billion, and this suddenly shocked Solhan. Because it wasn't a small amount, and again he couldn't decide it alone. Of course Taehyun knew that, and he wasn't so mean as to blame an ordinary subordinate. Solhan just had to do his best to reach an agreement. And also, just in case Solhan commits a betrayal, he will do something to prevent it, which he will plant a seal on Solhan. A contract made by the Auken using magical powers. Breaking it will result in a permanent random penalty. Then Taehyun said the first requirement was to pay the money he asked for. And tried my best in cleaning up the incident in the game, and the first requirement has been fulfilled. The media said that the incident in the game was just a fire caused by a gas explosion without any casualties. The second requirement was also carried out when Taehyun got a call on his cell phone. It turns out that the person who contacted Taehyun was Solhan. The second requirement is that Solhan will provide information about the association and warn Taehyun of retaliation from Leeji. What Taehyun is currently facing is a messenger from Leeji's father as an act of revenge to finish off Taehyun using the two weapons in his hands. The black one didn't stop throwing slash after slash at Taehyun, but not a single slash could hit Taehyun. After getting bored of dodging every slash, without using his abilities, Taehyun intended to catch the black man. But when Taehyun was about to catch him, he first darted behind him to avoid Taehyun's hand. Then the black man jumped up to launch an attack with the weapon in his hand. Without expecting it, Taehyun suddenly disappeared from that place until his attack only hit the floor there. Suddenly he opened his eyes as if surprised when Taehyun said that the black and the white were indeed famous for sneak attacks, but he already suspected that they couldn't catch Taehyun. Leeji is so special, said Taehyun, who was now right behind him with his feet ready to step on the black man's head. In the end, all they could do now was just that. Meanwhile, they moved to a black car which was currently on its way. In the car it turned out to be Yu Ah-young, who was talking to the chairman via telephone. He said that the material player selection had ended, and he will gather all the very promising players throughout the country. He also guesses which participant the chairman is waiting for. Of course the one the chairman is waiting for is Shin Yoonbak, an S-rank awakener from Busan. And the chairman laughed. He said of course he was great, but the participant he was most looking forward to was not Shin Yoonbak. But what he was looking forward to the most was Yu Ah-young's younger brother, who was none other than Lim Ah-young. Hearing that, he said that his younger brother was the incompetent person in his family. And that statement made the chairman laugh. The chairman also said that if Yu Ah-young's tongue is as sharp as usual, then who is Yu Ah-young looking forward to the most? Is that boy too? Yu Ah-young said that he had just heard very interesting news. This made the chairman curious. Yu Ah-young said that Deputy Chairman Go Tae-wook visited a child personally. Skipping the other Class S representatives, he also asked if the chairman wasn't curious about what abilities the child actually had. Which child was meant by Yu Young? None other than Taeyun. Now that he has finished defeating the two assassins, it seems that the black and white men were immediately knocked unconscious by Taeyun. In such a sad condition. After he defeated them, he was confused. He didn't know why that happened, why he couldn't use his predation skill to devour the two assassins, to which the system said, if Taeyun's physique is insufficient due to overload. Finally, Taeyun handed them over to be handled by the association. They didn't expect that. The two criminals interfered with the association players, even daring to disturb high school participants who will follow the Tyrael players. Go Taewook said he was grateful to have been contacted by Taeyun. Did Taeyun find any clues regarding who was the mastermind behind the attack? Taeyun was silent when he heard that, thinking about who was the mastermind behind the incident, but he chose not to tell Go Taewook even though he knew that the mastermind behind the attack was Taesan's group, as if he believed that Taeyun didn't know. Go Taewook intends to add guard for another participant. On the other hand, Taeyun thought if he said it, then it will add to the problem for him. At this time it is important. What he was thinking about was not Taesan but his predation ability, which can't be used. Just because Yang's physical abilities are insufficient, he couldn't use his predation skills. He was also thinking about whether he should improve his status or not, so that his physical deficiencies could be overcome and he could use his predation again. But he didn't know yet how to increase his status, considering that all this time he has always used predation to increase his level. He has even gained every ability at this time. By devouring those he had previously defeated, suddenly he felt very annoyed because he couldn't find a way to improve his status apart from trying what he knew. In short, moving to a training place which is in Korea, named Blackhead, their guide seemed very happy. He welcomed every customer who came to that place. When I saw the customers who came there, it turned out that the customer who came there was Taeyun and also Jae-hyung, who looked so annoyed because Taeyun took him to that place, where someone needs a lot of money and also skills to be able to enter there. The guide also said that the place is not a place that can be entered by children, but Taehyun gave a card and registered for them, which card was the PP card that Taehyun got after establishing cooperation with the Alchemist Guild. Taehyun asked that it should be enough. Besides that, the guide thought that it was a PP card from the Alchemist Guild, one of the 4 major guilds. The guy didn't know why a child like Taehyun had that card. Is Taehyun a son of Hygranker, or is he a player? But if he takes it for granted, it will bring problems for them. They would be confused about what he should do. In the midst of the woman's confusion, a burly man, while putting on a strange pose, suddenly surprised the female guide with his words. This burly man is the trainer at Blackhead who is most admired by every visitor. They often call him Migsteel. He told Taehyun, if that place is not a place that can be entered only with money. Just hearing his name made Jae-hyung and the female guide so amazed. But for Taehyun it was a strange name, and he acted like a stressed person. Even everyone who saw it thought Taehyun was a poor beginner. Because he was dealing with Migsteel while showing every muscle in his body, he asked if Taehyun could see. Everyone got goosebumps just by hearing his name. But Taehyun instead called them weak creatures, which made him give Taehyun a sharp look after Taehyun called him weak creatures. This even made the female guide and Jae-hyung seem surprised to see Taehyun dare to say something that offended the man, as if he didn't accept it. Humiliated by a small child, he changed his pose again while asking if Taehyun said that he was indeed stronger. With his Santa, Taehyun invited the burly man for betting, with the agreement that the loser would pay the membership fee for a year. When he heard that a boy dared to challenge him, he suddenly laughed. As if he was sure he could beat Taehyun. Without thinking twice, he accepted the bet. Not long after that, they began to enter a virtual world, which was programmed like a game world. They intended to hold a match using this method. Suddenly all the visitors there immediately cheered when they saw the cocktail fight. Who was going to fight a high school boy? Besides that, Jae-hyung was suddenly shocked to see the virtual world in front of him. He thought that it was ABI's, but the guide, saying that it is a virtual training in that training center, in the same virtual world as the end, one has to carry a very heavy load to defeat monsters up to rank B level and until the shortest time in competitive training runs out. That is the usual method used in the training center. For ranking competition. For everyone who took part in the training there, without knowing who Taehyun was, the female guide thought that the match was very unfair. Because against Mixsteel, who they think is very great, and it seems that Mixsteel is also so confident that he can beat Taehyun that he doesn't stop, laughing happily. With such enthusiasm he lunged to finish off the monster which was in front of him. He also thought it was Taehyun. Is a stupid boy. Because he dared to challenge him, he also said. If his skills are unrivaled in every battle against every enemy and also in terms of movement in the virtual game, he believes that his skills. He doesn't lack anything, so it makes it easier for him to move quickly, plus the weight he can lift is at a different level, so he is confident in his abilities. He could beat Taehyun. With that he could train for a year for free. When he was so sure he would be able to win against Taehyun, he glanced back. As if he saw something, apparently unexpectedly Taehyun suddenly moved as fast as lightning until he passed him, while eliminating every monster. The one in front of him. And it seems that Taehyun is also able to jump while carrying a load that is greater than the load carried by the man. Taehyun stopped for a moment when he saw several monsters attempting to carry out an attack. Without letting him pass, but he easily defeated every monster without leaving a single one behind for the burly man. Even though he carried a burden that was much heavier than that man, it seemed like it was nothing for Taehyun after defeating all the lowest level monsters. Now it's time for Taehyun to face monsters that have a higher level than the previous ones, but a group of monsters that are stronger and also have a lot of burden. Unable to stop his fast movement in finishing them off until Taehyun reached the last sand, in finishing the game he tried to use a little of his abilities to defeat the remaining monsters and also finish the game very quickly without waiting long. Taehyun immediately blew up all the monsters with the combo that has the highest value. Right in front of the man, his burly body had been silent for a long time and he was immediately stunned when he saw Taehyun's abilities. Until he broke out in cold sweat as if he didn't expect to be defeated so easily by a kid. Not only the burly man but everyone there was immediately stunned. As if he couldn't believe it, initially Taehyun only planned to train there for 30 days, but with the maximum load it was quite heavy training, he said. For that man, if the bet is heavy enough, then quickly pay and get out of his sight, and 1 month has now ended since the announcement of the changes to the player exam. The day that everyone has been waiting for has finally arrived. That day is when the player license exam begins. The place where every promising candidate will take an exam to become a player. In this exam, the association has made a change by allowing participants of various ages, and also the country gathered in the exam hall, to take the licensing exam. There are also some walk-in, the famous rank A weekend named Jungwoo, known as an unrivaled person in close combat with an outstanding battle sensei who makes S-rank A weekends hesitate to challenge him. He is Ji Slan, an A-rank awakener, someone known as unrivaled people in the Busan area, with Thunder God's ability, named Shin Yunbok, an S-rank walk-in, and a woman, the one who is rumored to have the highest metric recorded among the exam candidates this time. A woman with S ability named Lim Ayong, which is also S-level weakened. Not only them, there are countless talents who are also participating in the exam this time in the crowd. Everyone who is there. There was a woman who was trying to get to the front. She felt sad if she failed to report the event, then he will be fired. This woman is a reporter. The aim was to interview and photograph player candidates. Seeing so many people coming there, he felt he wouldn't be able to get in and he wouldn't even be able to meet him. With a single candidate, not to mention. He had to take a picture of every candidate there, he said, being ranky it seems. That means nothing worked. At the same time, Taehyun appeared to have just arrived there. The woman also turned around when she heard Taehyun babbling because there were so many people, which had filled the place so that the candidates couldn't get through there. Suddenly the woman opened her eyes when she heard Taehyun say a candidate. While walking past the woman, Taehyun kept muttering as if he didn't see the woman who intended to greet him. Seeing the situation in that place, Taehyun felt that it was very annoying, and it seemed that in the player license exam this time Taehyun was listed as a reckless jerk. Suddenly the woman stopped Taehyun. She didn't want to waste the opportunity. When he happened to meet one of the licensing exam candidates, meanwhile everyone who was enthusiastic about wanting to see how the licensing exam went this time kept coming. Fill around the exam hall. And long story short, Taehyun had arrived at the exam hall. He was immediately directed there by the officer. Because the exam will start in 1 minute. And Taehyun was the last candidate who had just arrived there. Taehyun felt relieved that he wasn't late getting there. Due to the sudden interview conducted by the woman. The interview was a precious moment like gold, but even so he had to try to build a good image when he first became a license exam participant. It seems that quite a few Aken are taking the player license exam. With the association's decision not to limit the age of Aken, there will be more exam participants this time. Every fan of various ages and even from various cities wants to take the licensing exam in order to become a player, even though most examinees. He is a high school student who is not yet old enough to become a player candidate. But with the existence of association policies, every Aken who is still in high school, now you have the opportunity to become a player. Like Lim Ah-young, who is an S-level awakener, who is currently shocked when he met Taehyun. And also Taehyun, who saw Lim Ah-young like that. It surprised him. What's wrong with that woman? To which Lim Ah-young was so surprised when he saw Taehyun, which looks different from a physical perspective. Or his current appearance, he saw that everything looked very different. He even saw Taehyun tilting his head up. He didn't know what had happened to Taehyun. But Taehyun said that he had only practiced a little, but Lim Ah-young didn't believe that Taehyun had only practiced a little. He had indeed heard regarding Taehyun's resurrection, but he didn't believe it. Taehyun changed drastically in 1 month. Then Lim Ah-young remembered what happened to Lee Jae. He asked. There wasn't that time. Before Taehyun had time to answer, a screen showed someone welcoming them first by calling them young heroes who would shoulder the future. Which person is that? He is an association official, which will explain the rules for their first trial. Who wants to become a player? First, the association told them to see the participant card, which is attached to the clothes of all participants. There, in this exam, all participants are required to collect 5 cards of other participants, including theirs, which is what it means if they don't have each other's cards. So they were declared failures. That's what is called battle. Compete for participant cards, and also their time limits to fight over and keep each other's cards is 1 hour. Looks like it's there. Even the floor suddenly changed. Become a battlefield for all participants. The one in the hall. The association also allows all participants, using any method, to be able to get that card, unless they commit murder, without a long wait. The first part of the licensing exam. Now it has started. By using the hall over there as the first test arena. Most of the participants were visible. Try to work together to fight Lim Ah-young, which is S level, so that later they won't be targeted by Lim Ah-young. Suddenly he uses his abilities to fight them all without caring about how many opponents there are. Those who wanted to defeat him, immediately a lump of ice immediately froze them, and some were blown away by Lim Ah-young's attack at the same time as Lim Ah-young's action being watched. According to several association members, they considered that Lim Ah-young was a very promising S-level candidate with his impressive abilities, but they also couldn't look down on him, underestimating the abilities of other candidates. Each of them has abilities that surpass the previous candidates, especially what they should pay attention to is the young man over there. The young man was Shin Yoon-bak, an elementary school student from Busan who was also a promising candidate with his Thunder God ability. Even they also saw 20 minutes since the exam started. Not a single attack was effective against the 2 S-level students according to their abilities Lim Ah-young and Shin Yoon-bak. I wonder who will win, but it looks like Go Tae-wook, as if not interested in the 2 candidates. In his mind, Go Tae-wook said it was only natural that they would attract attention due to their level. It's indeed high, but he has seen a level that he can't believe, namely Taehyun. For him, Taehyun will definitely dominate. This exam is so easy, he also hopes that Taehyun will show all his abilities to those who witness the exam. He can't wait to see how Taehyun dominated the exam this time. However, it wasn't what he expected. It turns out that currently Taehyun is fighting with one of the participants who is known to be unbeatable. In a close fight, Go Tae-wook was suddenly shocked to see Taehyun fighting one-on-one with a Class A weaken even just by looking at him. He seemed so disbelieving. With what Taehyun is doing right now, Go Tae-wook doesn't believe it. A level A weaken named Jong-wook who has the Iron Skin ability. Currently he is fighting Taehyun, a level C weaken. Using his Stone Skin ability, he thought whether he was overestimating Taehyun Yang's current abilities. His abilities were matched by a Class A weaken. He even felt strange when he saw Taehyun couldn't avoid a single attack, but he also realized something. Regarding Taehyun's action, is it possible that it was an intentional action where Taehyun deliberately received every blow thrown by Jong-wook? It seems that Taehyun is very happy to face every blow that will hit him even though he has received quite a lot of wounds, but he still receives the blow, immediately a blow. What was so strong hit right at Taehyun? He seemed to be aiming for something. By relying on the wounds he received, this even made Jong-wook so annoyed when he saw Taehyun. He was injured quite badly, as if Taehyun was mocking him with the stupid actions he was doing at the moment. He knew that Stun Skin was weaker than his Iron Skin. Taehyun might even attack him directly and take the blow on purpose. But he was suddenly shocked and stopped what he was saying when he saw Taehyun get up and say that he was talking too much. It turns out that receiving every blow makes Taehyun's stamina increase along with his charm status. That's why Jongwo's punches are very important for Taehyun. Taehyun knew that even though he had been training for a month, he still couldn't use his predation. It seemed like he wasn't able to use it yet. And the only way to improve abilities through practice is to stimulate Taehyun, so that it reaches maximum capacity. That meant that even combat that was a little bit closer to someone's limit could also be considered as training. So he felt that it was not time to use the predation ability, which was currently still in a sealed state, due to training to increase his stamina until he can open the seal and use his predation again. All the training so far is not finished yet. It seems that Taehyun is so excited to face his opponent that he sees it as a tool to make it easier for him in training. But apart from that, Jong-wook was reaching his limit after fighting Taehyun for a while. He thought that Taehyun was a very scary boy. Until in the end, Jong-wook, a level A awakener who was known as invincible, suddenly collapsed in front of Taehyun. What is known as weaken is just ordinary, with C level. After defeating him in one-on-one combat, he took his opponent's cards. Currently Taehyun has 2 cards. He needed 3 more cards to pass the first test. Go Tae-wook, who witnessed Taehyun's action, suddenly laughed happily. He seemed amazed by Taehyun's abilities. Those who saw it thought that Go Tae-wook was very happy to see the abilities of all the promising candidates in the fight, even though in reality he only paid attention to Taehyun's abilities. He thought Taehyun was very determined to create such an intense training method in such a big survival game. But that was the challenge for Taehyun, even though improving his fighting skills required quite a lot of stamina. According to him, for now Taehyun needs to save stamina while collecting cards from each weaker participant. That is a good strategy. But before he had time to finish his thought, he was shocked again for the umpteenth time. Even the officers who saw it had time to wonder who the Class C Aken was. Did he not know the opponent he was facing right now? Or did he deliberately want to lose the exam this time? Which C-rank awakener did they think didn't see who the opponent was in front of him this time? None other than Taehyun. And also the participant Taehyun will face this time turns out to be Shin Yoonbak, an S-level awakener who has defeated dozens of other participants so easily. By relying on his Thunder God ability, he could easily defeat every participant and also get dozens of cards in an instant. Now he has 147 cards. Even though Shin Yoonbak is a level C awakener, it doesn't make Taehyun feel afraid in the slightest. Instead, he casually counted and asked how many cards he had. Suddenly this made Taehyun so excited to fight an S-level awakener. He said it was fine as long as the number of cards exceeded 5. Even though Taehyun was a Class C, he didn't hesitate to target the best candidate to face. He is confident with his abilities, he is able to dominate the player exam this time. On the other hand, Shin Yun-bak also did not hesitate to launch every attack with his abilities. Even though the attack didn't hit Taehyun, it was enough to make it difficult for him to get close to Shin Yun-bak with his Thunder God ability. Shin Yun-bak can easily launch every attack without having to get close to his opponent. Because Taehyun doesn't have long-range abilities, it's pretty easy. So he didn't stop dodging while approaching his opponent. After being close enough to his opponent, Taehyun took advantage of the opportunity to attack back. Using a leg kick coated with the stone skin ability, unfortunately Taehyun's attack could not penetrate Shin Yun-bak's defense. His leg kicks seemed to be blocked by lightning covering his body. He didn't expect that his opponent wasn't just using the stone skin ability, but he can also use his abilities to defend. Seeing that the attack couldn't hit him, he casually belittled Taehyun by praising his speed. Until he couldn't see where the attack came from, then he threw his lightning at Taehyun. This caused a thick cloud of smoke accompanied by flashes of lightning. Fortunately, Taehyun first jumped onto one of the walls to avoid the strong blow. He noticed an S-class awakener with the Thunder God ability. It was indeed difficult to face directly, especially since he didn't have long-range abilities. If he is not careful and also keeps his distance when carrying out attacks, he could have been hit by such a strong lightning shock. Moreover, his opponent could cover his body with Thunder God's ability, so he can block all attacks so easily. Not only that, he is also able to fight at close range and long distance, with the power of Thunder God that he can control as he pleases. In a situation where he couldn't use his predation, this makes it difficult to attack. And how could he break through Thunder God's defense, so that the attack can hit the opponent hard, while leading it? Without realizing it, Shin Yun-bak was already nearby. In a dismissive tone, he asked why Taehyun was no longer attacking him. Suddenly, this made him surprised when he saw that his opponent was in front of him in an instant. In his cornered state, Shin Yun-bak prepared to land an attack on Taehyun with a very strong lightning bolt in his hand. But fortunately Taehyun was able to avoid the attack. And the attack was so strong that it was able to destroy a very hard wall. After avoiding the attack, Taehyun tried to move away to keep his distance, while avoiding Shin Yun-bak's leg attack, which was also covered in lightning. However, Shin Yun-bak didn't stop there and launched another attack using his hands. Everywhere Taehyun tried to move away and avoid every attack. Shin Yun-bak seemed as if he didn't want to give Taehyun a chance to keep his distance. While laughing loudly, belittling Taehyun, he didn't stop chasing and launching every attack, without giving Taehyun a chance to get away until Shin Yun-bak was able to corner Taehyun by trapping him in a stronger lightning barrier, so he can direct all his lightning at Taehyun. Instantly all the attacks hit him, causing him to feel pain. Due to the strong pressure of the lightning hitting Taehyun, suddenly he laughed loudly when he saw Taehyun in so much pain. After being hit by such a powerful attack, he didn't even stop his attack. Besides that, Taehyun tried his best to survive when his body was shocked by Thunder God's powerful ability. Unable to stand the situation, he tried covering his hands with quite large stones to provide resistance to Shin Yun-bak. A lightning strike was so strong that it created a glow of light in that place. The light suddenly covered Taehyun's vision until he couldn't see around the place. He was forced to move away so he could see his opponent's movements. But unexpectedly, Shin Yun-bak had jumped high up to deliver an attack without letting Taehyun get away from him. By using such a powerful Thunder God ability, he prepared to launch his attack from a height, while Taehyun saw that Shin Yun-bak was about to launch an attack. He was unable to dodge because he was at a disadvantage. Instantly, a powerful bolt of lightning was immediately thrust straight at Taehyun. It seemed that the lightning voltage that was fired was so strong that it was able to destroy a very sturdy wall. Being in a disadvantageous situation, Taehyun was forced to accept and withstand all the lightning strikes, without being able to dodge or parry it. Suddenly he laughed with great satisfaction when he saw Taehyun able to withstand every attack, even strong attacks. He didn't expect that among the many examinees. There was one person who could make him enjoy fighting and had the courage to fight him. So far, everyone he faced was always busy running away. Without having the courage to fight him because he was afraid of the power he had, he thought that in the Tyrael player this time only 5 young people could cheer him up. But it turns out there was one more person who could make him enjoy fighting. Suddenly he felt so happy. He never thought he would find a toy that was really fun for him to play in the player test. Due to his obsession with playing his opponent, he didn't realize when Taehyun threw a stone. Unexpectedly, the rock was able to penetrate Thunder God's defense. What Taehyun couldn't destroy. Even regarding his head, he immediately fell silent as if shocked. After finding out that a stone so small could easily injure his head even when Taehyun was throwing several stones at him, he still didn't know what happened to his abilities. Every attack Taehyun delivers with a stone should not work on Thunder God's defense, which couldn't be penetrated so easily. Instantly, all the stones that Taehyun threw with such force he couldn't block with his lightning, until all the stones hit his body. In fact, all the stones were able to cause quite an impact on Shin Yun-bak, until he was hit several times by the rock. Stone Skin's ability really couldn't penetrate Thunder God even if it was pushed to its limit. It will only be destroyed because of the enormous pressure. But here in the player test arena, all the stones used as walls there are different. All the stones there were made of materials capable of withstanding the power of the weakened. Unlike Stone Skin, the stone there does not disappear even if it is destroyed. If Taehyun could use the stone as a weapon to penetrate Shin Yun-bak's Thunder God defense, which he couldn't penetrate with his abilities, then his opponent's ability was nothing to him. So he was able to beat him so easily. Meanwhile, Shin Yun-bak seemed to be panicking when he saw Taehyun use a bigger boulder to face him. And suddenly the large boulder hit him directly, until the stone shattered, like hitting a stronger wall. The impact of the rock, a very strong one, not only broke the Thunder God's defense, but he immediately fainted. The consequences of being affected are equally strong. Taehyun seemed happy to be able to beat Shin Yun-bak, a best candidate with powerful Thunder God abilities. In addition, all association officers, as if stunned. After seeing a fight they couldn't believe. Where's the best S-level weaken? Able to be defeated by just fighting weaken class C. They don't know who Taehyun really is. But rather than surprised God Tae-wook. In fact, I didn't think Taehyun was quite a great person, because he could beat S-level. He couldn't stop worrying when he saw Taehyun's action. After defeating Shin Yun-bak, until he fainted, Taehyun only took a few participant cards, and leave the rest scattered in that place. By collecting all exam tickets, he could relax while waiting for the remaining time, until the first exam is over. He had no intention of fighting the other participants. But unexpectedly a chunk of S, the middle shot straight towards him. Which chunk of S is nothing else? Is Lim Ah-young's? Kim Taehyun was the first to know that there was an attack. Suddenly he ran away, up to that S chunk, regarding the exact floor where Shin Yun-bak fainted. Saw the attack. He seemed surprised. He didn't know why the S chunk had gotten to where it was. When he looked above him, suddenly he was surprised when he found an object, which forms like a snow flower. It suddenly appeared right above him. Slowly the snow flower forms, covering right where Taehyun is, as if forming an S barrier. Even Taehyun was in it, just silently seeing how the snow flowers looked. As time went on, it covered the place more and more, until finally the snow flower arrived. Instantly forms a big ball, which covers Taehyun's surroundings, until there is not a single gap to get out from inside there. I don't know what Lim Ah-young's goal is. Deliberately creates a ball with his S ability, to lock them both up in there. Lim Ah-young appeared to be just walking towards Taehyun, without saying a word. And Taehyun also saw that. Just silent. As if I didn't expect it. It was all Lim Ah-young's doing. He even saw Lim Ah-young, who usually acts up, like women in general. Now the look is different. As if it has a purpose. Want to fight and defeat him. Taehyun doesn't know. Why is Lim Ah-young there now? I don't know since when he watched the fight against Shin Yun-bak. In the midst of Taehyun's surprise, Lim Ah-young said that he believed If power has a responsibility, power without accountability, just violence. He knew that Taehyun's camp was indeed strong. He never thought Taehyun can beat Shin Yunbok. Until like that. Hearing that, Taehyun didn't seem to know. Why did Lim Ah-yong suddenly say things he couldn't understand? Unexpectedly, Lim Ah-yong immediately attacked Taehyun, while saying that Taehyun will definitely beat Lee Jae-ik. In the same way, suddenly Taehyun seemed surprised. After hearing Lim Ah-yong say that, even Lim Ah-yong was not reluctant to carry out an attack. Without thinking, Taehyun immediately disappeared from in front of Lim Ah-yong. With his stylistic abilities, he intended to avoid the attack. But, even though Taehyun could disappear, movement remains limited because of the ice barrier. And Lim Ah-yong had also prepared. Everything is very mature. Inside the ice barrier, what he made, he can easily deliver attacks by exploding every piece of ice, wherever and whenever he wants. As long as Taehyun is there, in there, the ability to disappear, as if it's useless, because of the effect of the ice explosion, can make it visible to Lim Ah-yong. And if the ice doesn't stop exploding like a bomb, hiding or something like that won't do any good at all. As he dodged each blast, without realizing, Lim Ah-yong launched a hard kick, regarding right on the face. The kick suddenly sent him flying backwards, even to the point of making it, as if I wanted to faint. Due to the strength of Lim Ah-yong's kick, Lim Ah-yong did that, because he felt disappointed when he was in the game. He really believed in Taehyun. He thought Taehyun was a different person, not like Lee Jae. While expressing his disappointment, Lim Ah-yong never stopped launching every attack using sharp pieces of ice at Taehyun. Even Lim Ah-yong didn't hesitate to launch repeated attacks on Taehyun. He says come back. That Taehyun will not act rashly just for the sake of interest. But after seeing Taehyun fight, he finally understood. Eventually, both Lee Jae and Yukso, everything was Taehyun's doing. Having said that, Lim Ah-yong immediately launched an attack by using ice cubes, the bigger one on Taehyun. He didn't hesitate even though Taehyun was helpless, while Taehyun looks just silent, without doing anything. Even though he was continuously beaten and thrown with Lim Ah-yong's ability, not only did he throw him, Lim Ah-yong also didn't hesitate to hit Taehyun with big chunks of ice, until the ice breaks and created a thick cloud of smoke. Then Lim Ah-yong said, if the skill is used without permission, it's a crime. As a result of Taehyun's actions, and also Yuksuk, still in hospital, he knew Taehyun was suffering too, and wants to give an appropriate response to bullies at school. So he didn't report the problem, even though he knows the culprit was Taehyun. Apart from that, Taehyun seemed to still be surviving even though his body was injured to the point that he was shaking in pain. He still tried to get up. Meanwhile, Lim Ah-yong ordered Taehyun to stop taking exams because for him Taehyun didn't deserve to be a player, but he was suddenly shocked when he heard Taehyun asking who Lim Ah-yong was, who arbitrarily decided this. Without Lim Ah-yong, he thought Taehyun would be able to get back up even though he had beaten him with every fatal attack. What even an Aken of his level couldn't hold back. Taehyun said that if Lim Ah-yong couldn't even stop Lee Jae's cruelty, there was no such thing as responsibility, strength or qualifications. In the end, Lim Ah-yong just wanted to beat him by using the player test as an excuse that Lim Ah-yong had prepared. Taehyun casually told Lim Ah-yong not to be someone so sad. Suddenly Lim Ah-yong fell silent hearing everything Taehyun said. Then Lim Ah-yong asked, is that the answer Taehyun gave him while using his true ability where he formed the ice into a large hammer? He intends not to hold back his strength when facing Taehyun. Not only that, he also emphasized that he will beat Kim Taehyun in the player test. Apart from that, Taehyun was still silent while thinking about how he would defeat Lim Ah-yong, who is an S-class awakener considering his stun skin ability. It has been destroyed even hundreds of times and it has long lost its function. Even if he uses the disappearing ability, the ability will be easily cancelled. With Lim Ah-yong's area attack, although the heart-binding ability that increases his status is active, it is not enough to change the course of the fight. The predation is still sealed. And also the remaining mana is not enough to cause paralysis in close combat like he did to Li Jie. The only thing. All he could do now was to move closer to Lim A-yong because that was all he had left. By relying on his remaining strength, he seemed confident that he could defeat Lim A-yong. Even though he was at a disadvantage, even Lim A-yong did not hesitate to swing his big hammer to deliver the strongest attack to defeat Kim Tae-hyun. It appears that the barrier created by Lim A-yong suddenly emits a light, whether it is the effect of their clashing powers. Or was it Lim A-yong's power? The light was instantaneous. Meet that barrier. The ice covering it instantly shattered. The light was so bright that everyone couldn't see what had happened. At Lim A-yong's fight, Go Tae-wook, who also witnessed this, looked very panicked about what happened to Tae-hyun in the fight there not long after the light beam starting to disappear. Go Tae-wook suddenly opened his eyes as if surprised to see that. He just remained silent without turning his eyes, watching the events in the arena. If you look at the arena from a distance, it looks like there has been a very fierce fight between Lim A-yong and Tae-hyun amidst thick smoke. Everyone is watching. A scene that had never happened in the previous player exam where Tae-hyun was approaching Lim A-yong in such a gentle way. They didn't even move an inch as if they were fainting, but in reality they weren't in a fainting state, but Tae-hyun deliberately held Lim A-yong so that he didn't move. When he kissed her mouth, just seeing Tae-hyun approaching him made Lim A-yong so surprised, but what was even more surprising to him was when he found Tae-hyun middle of kissing his lips. Even he couldn't let go. We are shown at a glance how Tae-hyun and Lim A-yong fought and what Tae-hyun's goal was so that Tae-hyun in the end defeated Lim A-yong using a kiss. In that fight, Lim A-yong did not hesitate to smash his big hammer at Tae-hyun, who was trying to move forward, causing the ice shield to what he made instantly shattered behind a very thick cloud of smoke. He couldn't see whether his punch hit Tae-hyun or whether Tae-hyun could avoid the blow. But when he looked up, suddenly he seemed to see something, which made him so surprised. It turned out he was shocked when he saw Tae-hyun preparing to lunge right at him. He didn't expect Tae-hyun to be able to avoid the blow without taking any impact. At the crucial moment between life and death, Tae-hyun carries out his plan as best as possible so he can defeat Lim A-yong. Tae-hyun's plan to defeat Lim A-yong was to land a kiss on Lim A-yong. However, Tae-hyun's goal is not just to give a kiss, because the kiss he gave Lim A-yong was not just an ordinary kiss. Tae-hyun's goal is to insert his paralysis ability into Lim A-yong's body through a kiss. A status-altering ability is more effective at close range than at long range and is aimed directly. So Tae-hyun combined his paralysis abilities into his blood and injected it into Lim A-yong's mouth so Lim A-yong could swallow it. He had also considered a Tier S awakener that had the body defense of a monster. This action was a bet, and as a result Tae-hyun was able to defeat Lim A-yong by injecting him with paralysis. It seemed that Lim A-yong couldn't move his body as if he was suddenly paralyzed. He also didn't realize that Tae-hyun injected a poison that made him paralyzed. For some time, as a result of that kiss, Tae-hyun not only defeated Lim A-yong but his charm status had also increased by 3 points. Right after defeating Lim A-yong, the first phase of the player exam was finally completed. And of course Tae-hyun was the only player who dominated the first test. There were traces of a fight that was so fierce in the first phase of the exam that it destroyed part of the room there. With the completion of the first part of the player exam, the medical team will move all candidates who have been injured somewhere to receive treatment. Even though Lim A-yong suffered from paralysis, he passed the first part of the exam. Because he didn't lose his cards and he was still conscious. For Kim Tae-hyun, he not only managed to get 7 participant cards, but his achievement of defeating Shin Yoon-bak and also Lim A-yong made him an unexpected candidate. His achievements in the first part of the exam had made him the center of attention for all the player exam candidates, due to defeating 2 S-level awakeners. Of course, all the candidates there couldn't stop talking about Tae-hyun, who was a C-level awakener. So they were curious about what method Tae-hyun used so that he was able to defeat 2 S-levels so easily. Besides that, Tae-hyun didn't care about everyone who was talking about him. He only thought about wanting to have recovery skills. After seeing how impressive the recovery skills the medics had, while he was thinking that, he suddenly turned around when he heard someone calling his name very loudly. It turned out that the person calling him was Shin Yun-bak. He immediately launched an attack on Taehyun with his abilities. Taehyun didn't block the attack as if he didn't expect Shin Yun-bak to dare to attack suddenly. When the test was over, even using his abilities without stopping his attacks, he said that Taehyun would not be able to use the same tricks as in the test arena. In that place he could make calculations on Taehyun as he pleased. This made all the candidates come there. They didn't know what had happened. But after seeing Shin Yun-bak, they guessed that the fight was an act of revenge against Taehyun. Suddenly they were enthusiastic to support Shin Yun-bak, because the fight could be said to be an advantage for them. This could reduce the number of candidates, without difficulty facing others. The stronger won. That support didn't make him enthusiastic about beating Taehyun. But it seemed he didn't need the cheers of all the candidates who saw him, until he didn't hesitate to strike his lightning bolt at them to silence all the candidates who were watching, so they can be quiet without disturbing his fight with Taehyun. Suddenly Taehyun smiled as he responded to the crazy person who deliberately invited him to fight with Taehyun, when they had just finished being treated by medical staff. He thought that his defeat in the first exam was because Taehyun used a cunning trick. So this time he will avenge his defeat to Taehyun by having a fair fight. He also laughed happily while saying that Taehyun had cheap tricks. So he will teach it so Taehyun knows who is on top. This statement is a very interesting conversation. The conversation didn't scare Taehyun in the slightest. But he fell silent when he felt a sudden shock appear in that place. Unexpectedly, Shin Yun-bak, who was going to attack Taehyun, suddenly fell to the floor until the floor was destroyed. Even Taehyun almost had the same fate as Shin Yun-bak. A gravitational pressure that appeared from nowhere suddenly threw him to the floor without being able to get back up. It's like being crushed by a fairly large rock. It turned out that the pressure came from the ability of someone coming towards him. In fact, everyone who was nearby immediately fell unconscious due to the strong pressure. The closer the person walked, the stronger the pressure he exerted on everyone within his reach. And Taehyun struggled to withstand the strong pressure until he broke out in cold sweat. He seemed to know who the person was as soon as he saw the person getting closer to him, which he is a rank S player named Sung-jin. He is one of the strongest assets the association has and is also a potential SS class player. Taehyun knew that because in his previous life he had seen various strong players in the association. Sung-jin seemed impressed when he saw Taehyun could withstand the pressure, which he found the intense pressure he was emitting. He didn't expect that there would be a candidate who could hold him back, until he was interested in seeing how far Taehyun could withstand the pressure he was giving. Then he showed his ability to add weight to the pressure he put on Taehyun. Instantly a stronger pressure was immediately hit on Taehyun, to the point where Taehyun was overwhelmed to hold it in. Even the floor he was standing on was instantaneous. Crushed by the pressure, but even though the pressure grew stronger, he still tried to endure it. He knew that S-class awakeners and S-class players were indeed different. But maybe the difference is that far. Seeing Taehyun still able to withstand the pressure, suddenly he was even more impressed with Taehyun. Because no one can withstand its power. Even veterans wouldn't be able to resist. Without hesitation, he intended to add back his strength. He doesn't care even though Taehyun is a candidate in the player exam. But when he will add his strength, suddenly he was startled by someone suddenly calling him, until he stopped what he was doing. It turned out that the person who called him was a medical officer. Suddenly the officer immediately scolded Sung-jin by asking why he attacked Taehyun. Did he want to get rid of them before the second phase even started? Sung-jin reasons that he just wants to discipline them. But the officer didn't believe it, because it's not just once, but in every player test. Sung-jin always did that under the guise of doing something, even though he just wanted to test his skills. The officer suddenly threatened, if Sung-jin does that again, then they will report this to the head of the association. Taehyun seemed very tired after holding back Sung-jin's strength. Ignoring the officer's chatter, because it has made all the candidates faint. He turned to Taehyun and asked what his name was. Taehyun was so tired that he almost fainted due to Sungjin's actions. He did not hesitate to tell him his name. Hearing Taehyun's name, he also knew that Taehyun was a C-level Occult, who defeated two S-level Weekend decisively. Suddenly he smiled. He didn't expect it after so long. Finally, a very impressive candidate appeared in the player exam. Then Sungjin patted Taehyun's shoulder while guessing Taehyun's purpose, to which he said Taehyun was definitely targeting S-level players. Then he left Taehyun while saying that he would wait for Taehyun to arrive. Meanwhile, Taehyun didn't seem to understand what Sungjin was saying. He just turned his head without saying anything when Sungjin said that to him. And it's ridiculous that the medical staff didn't treat the candidate there. They instead chased Sungjin, who rushed to leave the place. In short, either after undergoing treatment and all candidates have recovered, they were immediately gathered in a place like a forest, and their Sungjin was seen waiting for their arrival. All of these candidates are candidates who were declared to have passed the first phase of the player exam. They were surprised when they saw several gadgets behind Officer Sungjin. I don't know what kind of test the association will give them, and why they were gathered in that place. Because all candidates who passed have completed the recovery period. Sungjin stated that they would start the second phase of the player exam. Of course, the second phase of the exam will be carried out on several gadgets in front of them, which is the real Rungda dungeon, which is inhabited by several monsters. Suddenly all the candidates seemed surprised. When they find the test, they heard that their second phase of the exam would be held in the real dungeon. It is explained that each party contains members of 5 candidates who arrive in the dungeon. A team will be formed with a player assigned as supervisor, who will explore the dungeon with them. While exploring the dungeon, all actions will be evaluated based on weapons, observation, knowledge, medical treatment, and also assistance. Weapons and consumables that all candidates need while exploring the dungeon will be provided by the association, so they won't lack anything when entering the dungeon. After explaining everything, Sungjin told all the candidates to take turns when entering the dungeon in front of them. Taehyun thought that the second phase of the exam was in the dungeon. Even beginners who have no real experience should be able to survive the Rongda dungeon, especially with active players. He also hoped that a double dungeon apocalypse would not appear in the dungeon they entered when carrying out the second phase of the exam. In his previous life, a double dungeon was found, the first in the Rungda dungeon at the location of the second phase of the player exam. It was a double dungeon apocalypse that had an S level, including the first exploration party. Many victims were destroyed, which ends in a brick dungeon. In various undiscovered dungeons. If only he could prevent it. But they are unlikely to believe baseless words. And even if it was revealed, he would only be suspected, which is really unfortunate. But for now, he will focus on his task. As long as he wasn't part of the first exploration party, there must be enough ways to survive. After thinking about that, he also entered the dungeon to join the party he was going to join. But when he entered the dungeon, it was as if he saw something that didn't fit. As soon as he met the player who will supervise their party, there was a player there who serves as supervisor, and also several candidates waiting for Taehyun to arrive. Inside the dungeon entrance, the supervisor is Manhua, a level A player. And what made Taehyun feel bad was the fact that the supervisor was Manhua. It was a player who discovered the double dungeon, even though he hoped that he would not be among the founders of the double dungeon. But reality doesn't seem to choose him, because he is currently in the same party as the player, which will find a double dungeon in his previous life. And long story short, there were several monsters in the dungeon, started coming to attack them, and the party is also getting ready to begin the test in conquering the Rongda dungeon. With the various abilities they have, they can easily defeat all the monsters that come there, even though it was their first time. After defeating several monsters they encountered, their supervisors also gave them applause. While praising their abilities, he judged that they had a great fighting spirit, even though it was a real fight and their first time. Player qualifications for all of them. It's confirmed to be running well. Getting praise like that makes them embarrassed. But not for Taehyun, who already know what will happen to them. In fact, he never stopped feeling annoyed. Because of the many parties. Entering the dungeon, he instead met the first party, which will find a double dungeon. Taehyun also knows that the item Manhua is using now is a unique item. Sage Ring, an item used by the first discoverer of the double dungeon. The Sage Ring item has a unique rank, an item that can increase strength, stamina, speed, and magic, each increased by 10%. Taehyun also knows that the level of the double dungeon is confirmed to be at level S. If now they are involved in an open condition, there was no way they would survive. Thinking about it all made him confused. I don't know how he could prevent their party from finding the double dungeon. And long story short, they suddenly stopped traveling and exploring the dungeon, as if they found something quite confusing. It turns out they were confused. When they found the road before them, they split into several parts. They don't know which path they will take. Then one of the candidates asked their supervisor, which path should they take? Unexpectedly, someone suddenly ran towards one of the roads. When Manhua wanted to discuss this with them, to determine which path they will take, turns out he was Taehyun. Suddenly they panicked when they saw Taehyun taking one of the paths without any discussion with them. Manhua, who panicked, immediately asked Taehyun to come back, because they don't know what dangers they will encounter if Taehyun takes individual action without discussion. However, Taehyun didn't care about that. Instead, he invited them to follow him. He took this action so that Manhua would not take his way, which will lead them into danger. So he deliberately took a different path than before his regression, so that the double dungeon incident happened in the previous life. He didn't experience it in his current life. Remembering when the apocalypse was discovered, so many candidates and players lost their lives due to the discovery of a double dungeon apocalypse that cannot be handled until a dungeon break occurs. He couldn't let the incidents in his previous life repeat themselves, even if it would kill him. He will continue to prevent that. With the unilateral decision he took, he was sure that they would not find the place where the double dungeon was located. However, he didn't expect that they would actually reach the place where the double dungeon was, even though he took great pains to lead them to a road where they would not find him. Suddenly Taehyun just fell silent when he saw the gate. In the midst of all the members who were confused and wondering why there could be another gate in a dungeon. Meanwhile, Taehyun still couldn't figure out how he got to that place. The place where the double dungeon apocalypse is located, even though they had taken a path to avoid finding a double dungeon. But why is the road they took connected to that place? The moment he thought that, another curious candidate suddenly stretched out his hand, which means he intends to touch the gate with his hand. Suddenly Taehyun immediately shouted at them not to approach the gate, because he already knew what would happen if they went in there. Taehyun said in a loud tone to them, "Didn't they see a gate in the dungeon? That is an unusual thing. In that case, it is more important. They have to report it." Then he asked Manhua's opinion regarding the truth of what he said, so that Manhua takes action to report the gate, without going in there. Manhua said it was the first time he had encountered a case like this. Basically, the right action should be to report it. Hearing that, Taehyun felt relieved. No, because Manhua's opinion is the same as what he said, so they won't enter that dungeon. However, Taehyun was suddenly surprised when he heard Manhua say the opposite, to which Manhua invited them to try entering the dungeon. As he knows, in his previous life, Manhua was a player who discovered the double dungeon. Surely he wouldn't ignore the dungeon. He would enter it before he reported the gate. He also said that he understood what Kim Taehyun meant. According to him, if the magic from inside the gate doesn't seem too dangerous, even though it looks like that. He also said it was only a D-rank gate. Even if something happened, he was a level A player and could handle it. Whether it's a gate prepared by the association or an anomaly, exploring them will certainly provide better scores for all party members. However, Taehyun denied Manhua's opinion so that they would not enter the gate. He said his knowledge of explorer principles was limited. But in reality, Manhua actually laughed at the principles that Taehyun said. Then he pointed at Taehyun while asking if that was something Taehyun understood. And does Taehyun understand what teamwork is in exploring dungeons? Suddenly the members agreed with Manhua. They said that previously it was Taehyun who was acting up. Now Taehyun is actually debating the opinion of an active player. For them, Taehyun's actions were too arrogant. Those words suddenly made Taehyun unable to fight their decision. He just thought that their actions were very stupid. Those who believed Manhua's opinion finally decided to join in exploring the dungeon, even though they don't know what they will encounter when they enter there. Meanwhile, Taehyun is still trying to convince Manhua not to enter the dungeon, without telling them what they will face when they are inside. But Manhua didn't care about Taehyun's ramblings. He decided to enter the dungeon, without listening to Taehyun's decision. Suddenly a light suddenly radiated. As soon as Manhua opened the dungeon barrier, it seems Taehyun couldn't stop them even though he tried to convince Manhua. As time went on, the light enveloped the place there, until their existence seemed to be swallowed by that light. Not long after the light disappeared, they were in the dungeon. As soon as they opened their eyes, Taehyun seemed surprised when he saw the place. Not only Taehyun, Manhua also seemed surprised when he saw the contents of the dungeon, one he had never seen before, but they were not sure whether it was the Rungda dungeon. They seemed to feel that there was something strange in the dungeon. The surrounding area is filled with pillars, and that place seemed to be above the sky. They saw that at the end of the place there was something that seemed to be waiting for them. It turned out that something at the end of the place looked like a living statue holding a sword. But he didn't move at all. Those who looked around the place as if it were scary couldn't stop asking questions about Manhua, because wherever they looked, they weren't sure if it was just the Rungda dungeon. Meanwhile, Manhua also doesn't know about this. Kim Taehyun, who was observing the place, tried to calm them down by telling them to look ahead. But instead they felt annoyed with Taehyun's attitude. Without caring about that, Taehyun said that something was coming there. Not long after Taehyun said that, two unknown creatures walked closer to him through the smoke that covered their vision. They discover a creature blocking their view. It turned out that what came there were two armed creatures like living statues. This creature is called the Deathnig, a monster entity that has an A rank. This suddenly made them very surprised when they saw the appearance of the Deathnig. They didn't understand why there were rank monsters in the dungeon. Even Manhua, who was confident he could overcome the dungeon, he suddenly broke out in a cold sweat as soon as he looked inside. He, who was so panicked, immediately ordered all his members to get into position to prepare to fight with the enemy who would come there. They covered their eyes. It seemed that the Deathnik was preparing to carry out an attack using the weapons they were holding as soon as he approached the humans who came to his place. With the weapons the monsters were using, they immediately delivered a powerful slash, creating a thick circle of smoke. Suddenly they were panicked by the powerful attack that the monster gave, making it difficult for them to avoid the attack. Luckily, it didn't hit them. Manhua didn't remain silent and tried to counterattack by using his ability to block it while the monster prepared to attack again. After he used his ability, a lava suddenly overflowed from the floor, which seemed to block Deathnig's footsteps when they were about to attack them again. Then he used that situation to carry out an attack. He used that situation to make a second attack by turning the ground into a sharp object that immediately stabbed at the monster. Manhua's ability instantly rendered the two monsters unable to do anything when their bodies were roasted by sharp objects. Not wanting to waste the opportunity to defeat the monster, he ordered all his members to jointly attack the monster using the strength they had. He also ordered two of his members to use other abilities, and also the lightning ability they have to make the Deathnik unable to see. Then he ordered the use of shields to protect the front, and the rest were asked to rush the enemy so that they would not have a chance to fight back. With the direction Manhua gave them, they were able to work together well, but Taehyun didn't seem to take part in the attack. He only observed them when fighting the enemy. However, with Manhua's guidance and their cooperation, they were finally able to defeat the two monsters. It looked like they were exhausted after defeating two A-ranked enemies. They also felt relieved to be safe and even seemed like they couldn't believe they could defeat a rank A enemy, even though it was their first time. Feeling dissatisfied with defeating the two monsters, their friends were arrogant. They are also not satisfied with defeating enemies who have rank A. They also do not underestimate their enemies until they challenge them without realizing that another enemy is coming from behind the smoke. Suddenly they seem to be shocked again when they saw another enemy heading there. Even Manhua, who was a level A player, just fell silent when he saw him. It turns out that the enemies who came this time were not just 2 but in fact there were 4 deadniks. Carrying various types of weapons, they came there simultaneously to face them. Suddenly they were shocked when they saw the number of enemies coming there, even though facing just 2 enemies overwhelmed them, let alone facing 4 enemies at once. In the midst of their panic, Taehyun didn't seem to care about the enemy, he only focused on looking for clues about the enemy they were currently facing. After examining it quite carefully, he seemed to realize that there was something strange about the enemy they were facing. But others don't know about this. And long story short, by relying on cooperation to deal with it, they again succeeded in defeating the 4 enemies who came there. However, even though Manhua and the others were able to defeat the enemy, he did not seem to believe what he witnessed afterwards. It turned out that he saw so many enemies coming there, he didn't expect that more enemies would come. Each of them defeated 1 enemy. Apart from that, they had run out of energy after facing the enemies who kept coming. And again, the members are just ordinary fans, not players. With their current condition being quite seriously injured, they could all die if they tried to fight all the enemies. Apart from that, Taehyun already knew what was wrong with the enemy they were facing. He told Manhua about the oddities that existed in that place. Hearing what Taehyun said made Manhua think about who Taehyun really was. Even though they fought so hard, Taehyun didn't seem tired. And again, he was the first to realize how dangerous the dungeon was. Even more so if Taehyun doesn't have measuring abilities. Even though they strengthen their abilities, they would never have gotten that far without the help of Taehyun's abilities. It made him wonder if Taehyun was really a woken jerk. And what did Taehyun mean about the weirdness he said? Then Taehyun said that it was just his opinion. But it seemed like the enemy they were facing wasn't a Death Knight. That statement suddenly made them wonder what nonsense Taehyun was saying. If not a Death Knight, so what creatures are they facing now? While taking a sword in front of him, Taehyun said that they would find out about it. Then he used his abilities in front of them, and immediately dashed off to face the many enemies there. By facing all the enemies alone, he intends to prove all the oddities that exist in that place. As soon as Taehyun approached the front, the enemy immediately landed an attack that was strong enough to cause an explosion. However, Taehyun seemed to be able to avoid this strong attack, until the attack only made a hole in the floor. They didn't know when the attack hit the ground. Taehyun had already jumped up to avoid the attack, which he took advantage of the situation when the enemy's view was diverted to get past everything, without difficulty facing a very large number of enemies. Not wanting to waste this opportunity, he immediately prepared his weapon. As soon as he arrived at the bottom, he immediately slashed the barrier blocking the large statue in front of him. Then Taehyun aimed the tip of his gun right at the statue's head, while he had the chance to destroy it. With one attack, he was able to destroy the head of the statue, until it falls to pieces. It even penetrated the black circle behind the statue. When he destroyed the statue, he seemed to panic when he realized that 2 enemies were about to attack from behind him. However, unexpectedly a light enveloped the place, causing the movements of all the enemies to suddenly stop. It turns out that the statue is the key to being able to attack. But after Taehyun destroyed the statue, all the enemies slowly disappeared along with that place. Suddenly, this immediately shocked them as if they didn't expect it when they saw the place suddenly disappear and change to a different place. In fact, they didn't seem to believe it when Taehyun told them that it was just an illusion trap. Which is a trap that displays places and virtual enemies. A tactic to drain the energy of intruders who enter there. Suddenly this explanation made them wonder. Because they have such difficulties just facing an illusion, does that mean that in the future there will be something even worse? This also suddenly made Manhua curious. How did Taehyun know it was a trap? Even though he had never fought Deathnik before. So how did Taehyun know? Taehyun replied that he didn't really know much about the enemy. And I've never fought him either. But what is certain is that he is very sure that Death Nick is not the same as the one they defeated so easily. And this suddenly made Manhua silent after listening to the assumptions made by Taehyun. However, Taehyun asked them to hurry up and continue down the dungeon before they died there. Even though their condition is not so good, they were forced to continue their journey so they could leave the dungeon as quickly as possible. The illusion had indeed disappeared, but their situation and circumstances have not improved. Since the appearance of the Apocalypse dungeon, the contents of the dungeon had changed completely. Even the injuries caused by fighting against the illusions were getting worse as time went on. Waiting for help is no longer an option for them. Their only hope now was to find the exit of the dungeon. After walking for quite a while, they finally found a large door, which they don't know what is behind the door. They also don't know what danger will occur. What dangers will await them behind that door? But if they don't open the door, they will probably die there. Manhua was forced to open the door, to find out if that is the way out, or is there something waiting for them? However, when Manhua opened the door, he seemed to see something inside. It turns out what they found in there was a dead knight, who seemed to be waiting for their arrival. When they saw that, they felt relieved because there was only one enemy in there, and one of them even laughed as if he was looking down on him. But unexpectedly, from behind the darkness, another enemy suddenly appeared, revealing his figure. Suddenly in front of them, those who had felt relieved suddenly turned into panic when they saw the number of enemies that appeared in front of them, and also a fire that came from who knows where suddenly lit up, lighting up the whole place. After the fire was fully lit, it turned out that the place was filled with so many dead Nig troops. As if that place was a base for the enemy. Not only above them but in front of them was also filled with enemy troops led by a dead knight. As if that place was a base for the enemy, as if they were about to welcome their arrival. This situation immediately made them tremble with fear when they saw that the whole place was actually filled with so many enemies in front of them. At this time, in the midst of their panic, one of the enemies was suddenly sitting on his throne. Laughing while calling them lowly humans, he told them that they had crawled so far to get there that the enemy found them and captured them. They will immediately start the duel, where the creature is the leader of the Dead Knight army and also the ruler of the double dungeon Apocalypse, which has an S rank. As soon as the leader declared a duel to Manhua and the others, some of the troops immediately prepared with their weapons. Then the troops immediately aimed their weapons to challenge one of them as an opponent to a duel. After that, they suddenly wondered what happened there and why the enemy troops did that. Taehyun replied that it seemed the enemy wanted to have a one-on-one duel with them. Hearing that immediately made the three of them panic because they didn't want to do that because they had reached their limit. Taehyun tried to control the situation by asking them to calm down. He said their goal was not to fight but to leave the place. However, those who were so scared even left the place without caring about their party mates. Those who didn't want to die in that place preferred to return to their original place without knowing what would happen if they acted rashly. Without them realizing, one of the enemies was preparing to attack when they were off guard. A slash immediately shot towards them. Fortunately, Taehyun and Manhua, who knew there was an enemy attack, immediately avoided the slash. However, those who intended to leave the place did not know that there was an enemy attack until the slash hit them hard. Suddenly, this made them freeze when they saw their members being finished off with one blow right before their eyes. This also immediately broke their calm. Taehyun panicked and immediately called Manhua. He said that he would face the enemy to buy time, so that Manhua could find a way to leave the place while he faced the enemy. However, Manhua threw him far behind without listening to Taehyun. He would rather face the enemy than let Taehyun face him. Taehyun, who was panicking, immediately called Manhua. He asked what madness Manhua would do by closing the door. In a loud tone, as if he hated Taehyun, Manhua told him to shut up and not act arrogantly as a low-level weaken. Those words suddenly made Taehyun silent, as if he didn't understand Manhua's words. Behind that wall, Manhua expressed his wish that he wanted to become an S-level player. But no matter how hard he trained and improved his abilities, instead of getting closer to his goal, he ended up getting further away. For Manhua, it was an opportunity. If he could solve the double dungeon case, he might be able to get treatment equivalent to an S rank. But the situation is like this, said Madohak while laughing. At the same time, the enemy was preparing to attack. In Madohak, it seems that the enemy this time is stronger than the previous one. Not only him, Madohak is also preparing to face the enemy who will attack him. With just one attack using his ability, Madohak is able to cut his opponent into several pieces. Then Madohak continued his words. He admitted that Taehyun was different. It's annoying to admit, but Taehyun has talent. So he couldn't manage it. He let Taehyun face the enemy alone. It was better for Taehyun to take his injured friend and get as far away from that place as possible. Because blocking all enemies is his job as a supervisor so that they can leave safely. He will face the Red Knight troops with his remaining abilities and energy. Whatever happens, he will not let them pass because that is his role. This suddenly made Taehyun silent. When he found out that Madohak sacrificed his life just to protect them, in the midst of this situation he seemed confused about what he should do. Should he follow what Madohak said or help him face the enemy? But he also couldn't just stay silent if someone was hurt. Just as he was thinking about that, the wall blocking the entrance created by Madohak for some reason suddenly shattered, as if hit by a strong explosion. In the midst of quite thick smoke, he suddenly turned around to see what was happening in there. When the smoke began to dissipate, it appeared that Madohak, who was a rank A player, was able to be defeated by the enemy troops very quickly. I don't know what kind of fight Madohak experienced that left him lying helpless against them. After defeating Madohak, the enemy also marched on. No one came closer to Taehyun. Meanwhile, Taehyun was still silent as if he couldn't believe the situation before his eyes, where all colleagues and even Madohak were defeated easily by the enemy. I don't know how he was able to save them, seeing their condition, who were currently lying helpless amidst the enemy's siege. And there are so many enemies that he cannot defeat using only his abilities. Apart from that, the enemy also aimed his weapon, inviting Taehyun to a duel. In his current situation, Taehyun has no other choice. He was forced to accept the enemy's challenge and face everything by relying on his current abilities. But he seemed desperate to see so many enemies there. Of course it won't be easy for him to defeat all those enemies. But when he looked down, suddenly he seemed to find something. It turns out he found a ring lying on the ground which belonged to none other than Madohak. He knew that the ring had an increasing effect on abilities when using the ring. And that's why Madohak always wears it. At the same time, the enemy was preparing to slash his sword at Taehyun. While Taehyun was thinking about what he should do, luckily Taehyun moved first to avoid the slash. He also used that opportunity to take the ring that was in front of him. In that situation, he could only hope that the ring could awaken his abilities, because there is no other way to survive. Besides that, a group of enemies came to surround Taehyun and prepared to attack him when he was wearing his ring. When the troops were about to launch their attack on Taehyun, suddenly the ring activated and also released a fairly strong force. Even the ruler of Deathnik could feel this power, who was relaxing watching Taehyun's fight against his troops. It appears that Taehyun's predation ability immediately activates and kills all the enemies who was surrounding him. Not even a single enemy attack could hit him. This immediately shocked the Deathnig leader until he wondered what ability Taehyun used to be able to finish off his troops in an instant. After he wore Madohak's Sage Ring, all his abilities were increased by 10 points. In other words, the predation ability that was originally so strong has now become even stronger. Not only did it increase his abilities, but the ring also helped fulfill the requirements to unlock his seal of predation, which he had been unable to use for a long time. And the scene continues. Look forward to the next story. Like if you like it, comment your opinion and subscribe too for those of you who have just joined. Hope you enjoy it and thank you.